Chapter 26. In the next few days, Richard lived step by step until Wednesday, which made people feel dreadful. Standing in front of Snape's office door, Richard summoned the courage to knock on the door. "Come in," a low and gloomy voice sounded. "Good evening, Professor. May I ask why you asked me to come here?" "Don't talk nonsense. Let's deal with that pile of slugs first. I don't need to teach you how to deal with it." "Okay, Professor. I'll take care of it." At first, Richard didn't realize what Snape meant by the pile. But when he opened the wooden barrel next to the operating table, he was dumbfounded. "This is so much cheating. Professor, this is a bit too much. If I were you, I wouldn't talk so much nonsense. If you hurry up, then you won't have to sleep tonight. Of course, you can just leave, and then you won't have to attend my class." Hearing Snape's gloomy words, Richard could only scold his mother silently in his heart, not daring to relax in the slightest. At the beginning, when handling one or two, Richard still felt the sticky snot-like mucus was disgusting, and then he became numb. Richard was a little happy to handle the full bucket of slugs mechanically. "Is this being PUA? Since it's done so quickly, help me add the sleepy bean juice to the cauldron." Hearing this, Richard walked over mechanically, picked up the knife next to the sleepy bean, squeezed a sleepy bean that was placed aside, then picked it up, squeezed the juice into the cauldron, and repeated like this 13 times. "Okay." Professor Richard was about to say something to Snape, and suddenly realized that this was an improvement method in the Half-Blood Prince book, and Richard shouldn't know about it. "Very well. It looks like you did read that book." Snape looked at Richard lividly. "Yes, Professor. I found a textbook on the bookshelf in the classroom with an improved method of handling potions. I thought it was great, so I studied it." Richard knew that he couldn't hide it, so he told the truth to be honest. "Have you learned a spell in it? Use this spell on me." Advertisement. Richard knew that Snape was talking about the Shadowless Curse, and since he had told the truth, there was no need to hide it. "Anyway, it's not my fault. If you cast such a dangerous spell casually, you can still blame me," Richard thought as he took out his wand. "Professor, I think you'd better prepare yourself. This spell is more powerful." Snape was taken aback when he saw Richard's serious expression. Then he also took out his wand and cast an iron armor charm on himself. Shun Feng Wuing. Seeing that Snape was ready, Richard fired a spell directly at Snape. At this time, a shadowless sharp edge broke Snape's iron armor curse in an instant, and Snape quickly cast the iron armor curse on himself, but he was still careless, causing his arm to be scratched. Seeing Snape wounded by his own spell didn't make Richard happy. Instead, he quickly ran to Snape's side and directly released Shin Feng Wuing's counter curse. "Quick healing. Professor, are you okay? It's all my fault." Seeing Richard's concerned eyes, Snape's face softened, too, but only for a moment, and then scowled again. "Just the current magic power can do me any harm." While speaking, he rubbed his arm that was dying of pain. "You have been going to the infirmary all the time to practice the counter curse of this spell. Since you should know and learn the counter curse of this spell, I won't say anything, but you can't teach Shun Feng Wuing anyone." "Good, Professor." Richard agreed obediently. "Although you can counter spell, if you dare to release it on any student in Hogwarts, then I will definitely drive you out and take back the curse. Now that you are the boss, you can do what you say. When I grow up, I will let you sing Conquer, and it will have to be the Chinese version." While agreeing to Snape, Richard flirted there. "You should also know that this is black magic. How do you control your emotions?" Snape asked. Advertisement. "Professor, I learned the Patronus charm from Professor Flitwick." "You learned the Patronus charm?" Even Snape was surprised at this point. Guardian calling God, Richard did not force him, and directly released the Patronus charm. That's when a Yin Huang dragon made of light appeared in Snape's office. This is no longer something that beginners can release, and even the wizards who control the Dementors in Azkaban can do this at most. Sure enough, his talent is frighteningly high. Thinking of this, Snape understood why Dumbledore wanted to pay attention to this child himself. If he did evil, he would not be comparable to Voldemort. Looking at Richard's immature face, and then thinking about Richard's concern for him just now, Snape's face softened a little. Suddenly Snape looked at the long, snake-shaped Patronus in front of him, and an idea gradually formed in his mind. "Richard, would you like to transfer to Slytherin House?" Hearing Snape's words, Richard looked at his Patronus, embarrassed. "Professor, my patron saint is not a snake, but a flaming dragon." "Of course I know. I just asked if you would like to transfer to Slytherin College. Although I have never done it before, I am sure that as long as you are willing, I will go and tell Dumbledore." How could the arrogant Snape in front of the students admit your mistakes? "Forget it. After all, I am Muggle-born and not pure-blooded." Slytherin will definitely not welcome me, and everyone in Ravenclaw treats me very well. Whether it is the dean or the seniors, they take good care of me. Just kidding. Leaving the colorful Ravenclaw and going to the gloomy Snake Yard. It's something you can't think about doing at this time. Hearing Richard's refusal, Snape didn't say anything. He still knew the reputation of Slytherin after so many years, except for those pure-blood families and their die-hard loyalists. No other little wizards were willing to go to Slytherin. The suggestion just now was just because I was shocked by Richard's talent, so I couldn't help but say it, but Richard is really not suitable for Slytherin. In this way, the Wednesday agreement between Richard and Snape came to an end. After signing the unequal agreement that he would come to Snape's office every Wednesday to do odd jobs, Richard finally walked out of this black-hearted school factory. To be honest, Richard was quite satisfied. After all, Snape's level was right there, and learning from him was definitely worth the money. The price of potions for the wizard class has always been high, and every potion master basically represents endless wealth. Chapter 27. After becoming acquainted with Snape, Richard also enjoyed the Slytherin treatment in potions class. Extra points for boldness. This made Ravenclaw's eaglets and Gryffindor's lions very curious. One day, when Richard was reading in the library, Hermione ran over quietly. He took a random book and covered it in front of his face, and said to Richard, "How did you do it? Get Snape to give you points, and hear that he keeps asking you to answer questions?" "Probably because I'm not in Gryffindor, and we don't have classes with Slytherins." "I think so. I don't know why Snape keeps targeting Gryffindor." "Well, in fact, this should also be a tradition of the school. It seems that the founder of Slytherin and the founder of Gryffindor had conflicts at the beginning." Richard didn't really want to say that Snape was never targeting Gryffindor. It was purely Harry. "By the way, we will send Nobo away tonight. Do you want to come?" "Of course. I like Nobo very much after all." After waiting for this, the trip to the Forbidden Forest will start soon, and of course Richard can't miss it. "Okay, wait for us at the door of the Gryffindor lounge until 10 o'clock in the evening," Hermione said and left. Richard stayed in the library and continued to read books. After all, he just got the key today and hasn't opened it yet. There is nothing to be excited about. Copying more books on potions will be more useful for dealing with Snape. When Richard was still immersed in the ocean of knowledge, a long time had passed slowly. When Mrs. Pants came to remind Richard, it was already dark. After coming out of the library, Richard was still a little dazed. After going to the auditorium to have some dinner, he returned to the dormitory. Richard, who was lying lazily on the bed, slowly recovered at this time. After teasing Barnaby for a while, Barnaby ignored him. He went to the common room. "I can't continue to copy books, otherwise it will be easy to miss the time." Richard watched the senior girls play wizard chess for a while, which is very similar to the chess in the previous life, without love. After dawdling for a long time, the time finally came. Advertisement. When Richard came to the door of Gryffindor's lounge, the three little ones were already waiting there. "Come here, Richard. Although there are more people, you can still hide if you squeeze," Harry said to Richard while holding the invisibility cloak. "No, you guys hide well. I have a solution." After speaking, Richard cast the disillusionment curse on himself. Watching Richard suddenly disappear in front of them, both Harry and Ronald were a little inconceivable, full of envy, and just wanted to say something. At this time, the disillusionment curse, a spell that can only be learned in the upper grades. "I don't think you can learn it." Hermione directly dismissed their thoughts. "Damn Richard. He even learned the disillusionment charm," Hermione murmured. Immediately, everyone left Hogwarts Castle and came to Hagrid's hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Poor child. He has to leave his mother as soon as he is born, and he will be very sad when he wakes up. Hagrid sat beside a cage, crying. "Okay, Hagrid. You can still go and see it later." Harry comforted quickly. "Are you ready? We're taking him away. It's all been put in the cage. I also put Nobo's favorite toys, brandy, and a dead chicken in it too. Be careful, I won't go with you." Seeing that Hagrid was about to burst into tears, Richard quickly cast a levitation spell on the cage, and then everyone led the cage floating in the air and walked towards Hogwarts Castle. Just after leaving Hagrid's hut, Hagrid's deafening cries were heard. The people who suppressed their laughter hurriedly quickened their pace. Fortunately, Richard also came, and his levitating spell brought everyone to the top of the astronomy tower in no time. "Will your brother come on time?" Harry asked Ronald. "Sure. We have already confirmed the time with a letter, and we should be there soon. Charlie is much better than Percy and the others," Ronald said proudly. Sure enough, after a while, a small group of wizards rode over on broomsticks. When they landed on the astronomy tower, Ronald rushed up and hugged one of the red-haired wizards. He looked like a nice gentleman. His face was broad, weather-beaten, and freckled so that it looked almost brown-black. His arms were muscular, and on one arm was a large, shiny scar from a fire burn. "Charlie, this is Harry Potter." Ronald pointed to Harry and introduced to Charlie. Hearing Harry Potter's name, all the wizards who came looked over and showed friendly smiles. Harry was suddenly embarrassed, his face flushed, and he didn't know what to say. Advertisement. "Hi Harry, hello. You are all classmates of Ronald." Charlie came over, hugged Harry, and relieved Harry, but of course he didn't neglect the others. Then he looked at Nobo in the cage. "It's indeed a Norwegian ridgeback. Is it asleep now?" "Yes, Hagrid added some hypnotics to its food." Harry explained hastily. "It's not enough for reimbursement. If you wake up during the flight, it's not good. Brothers, let's add some precautions." After all, several other wizards also came over. They took out their wands and cast the stun spell on Nobo together. Richard felt a little bit sorry for Noble when he saw it. He suffered pain that he shouldn't have suffered at such a young age, but who can blame it? Hagrid can only be blamed. Yes, Hagrid. After that, they first cast a floating spell on the cage, and then separated 4 people to carry the cage and fly away first. Charlie hugged Ronald first, then bid farewell to everyone, and flew away on a broom. Everyone looked at Charlie with envious eyes. "He's so cool," Harry said. "Yes, and Charlie is very good to me. He never teases me. He brings me presents every time he comes back," Ronald proudly showed off. Just as they stepped off the platform, they heard a familiar voice from below. "How about the professor? I said they will definitely come here." Malfoy, Harry and Ronald horrified, and just about to put on the invisibility cloak, they saw Professor McGonagall standing beside them, staring at them sternly. "Really? What audacity, Harry, Ronald, Hermione. You are such a disappointment. Richard, why are you here?" Seeing that Richard was here, Professor McGonagall's eyes widened. "Look, you've brought Richard down," McGonagall yelled at Harry and Ronald. Chapter 28. 50 points will be deducted. 50 points will be deducted from each person. It is too late now. The 5 of you will be locked up together tomorrow. "Professor, why are there 5 people? Is there still me? Did you miscalculate?" Malfoy looked at the 4 people opposite, then looked at himself and said to McGonagall in a daze, "Of course, no matter whether your original intention is good or bad, anyone who goes out at night will be punished, and of course you will also be punished. Whether it is point deduction or confinement, you have to be with your classmates." Hearing this, Harry and Ronald looked at each other, almost laughing. "But have you ever thought that the 3 of you Gryffindor will deduct 150 points together, and Slytherin and Ravenclaw will only deduct 50 points? I hope you can hold on tomorrow." Richard looked at Hermione, who had already reacted, and was about to cry with pitiful eyes. The next day, when the little wizards came to the auditorium for dinner, they saw that the gemstones representing the scores of the 3 colleges had decreased a lot. The gems representing Gryffindor in particular are almost bottoming out. By the time Richard arrived in the Great Hall, Gryffindor had already begun to fuss. Richard hurriedly came to Ravenclaw's dining table and explained to the prefect Pinello that he had deducted 50 points. Ravenclaw's classmates all comforted Richard and told him that Ravenclaw didn't value this, and only the points Richard added in class both far exceed 50 points, which is not a problem. Richard sat down to eat in relief when he glanced at Gryffindor. Gryffindor should also know what happened last night, and knew that the point deduction was caused by Harry, Ronald, and Hermione, and then an interesting scene appeared. Gryffindor, who was supposed to be the least concerned about points, began to attack the 3 of them. Harry was the savior after all, so he didn't receive many attacks, mainly Hermione and Ronald. By this time Hermione was already crying on the table covering her face, but the others didn't stop. Seeing this scene, Richard couldn't bear it anymore, stood up, and walked to Gryffindor's dining table. Advertisement. Is this Gryffindor? Is this the most courageous and most united academy? You can do the math. Even if Hermione deducted 50 points, how many points will she add to Gryffindor? Is this how you treat your classmates? This time it's not just Gryffindor who deducted points. We Ravenclaw and Slytherin have deducted points. But which college treats its classmates like this? Only you Gryffindor. I am ashamed to be at the same school as you. On the professor's chair, Professor McGonagall was about to say something, but was stopped by Dumbledore. At the same time, after Richard finished speaking, regardless of whether Hermione agreed or not, he pulled her up and came to Ravenclaw's table, and Miles hurriedly took a seat beside her, making room for Hermione. Gryffindor also fell silent after receiving Richard's rant, while Slytherin, who usually looked down on other houses, nodded to Richard frequently. Especially Malfoy. The Slytherin prefect was still teaching Malfoy sarcastically because of his deducted points, but when he heard Richard's firing on Gryffindor, he quickly comforted Malfoy. They are going too far, Hermione, right? I heard Professor Flitwick talk about you. You should come to our Ravenclaw. You look nothing like Gryffindor. They don't like to study. Only you. His grades are already so good, and he often asks questions to the professor, Penelo said to Hermione from the side. And Hermione could only smile awkwardly at Penelo, then lowered her head and gnawed on the bread silently. Okay, Hermione, it's okay. They just deducted so many points all of a sudden. They didn't get used to it, and it will be fine in a few days. Richard comforted, I know. But I'm also very sad that so many points have been deducted. What they said is right. Speaking of Hermione's tears, Richard could only quickly comfort Hermione and hold her hand at the same time. Richard thinks this will give Hermione strength. Do you believe it? Being grabbed by Richard's hand, Hermione's face flushed instantly, and she had already forgotten whether she should be sad or shy now. After breakfast, Richard said to Hermione, Don't think too much, adjust yourself, we'll be in detention tonight. Then the two went to class separately. The day's class ended soon. Considering the trip to the Forbidden Forest at night and the consumption of the dragon's breath, Richard ran to the Hogwarts kitchen after dinner, asked the elf for some beef and chicken, and put it in the inside the memory. At night, Filch led the crowd to Hagrid's hut, thinking about it while walking. I should be allowed to punish them. I can guarantee that I will make them remember deeply. Okay, Filch, you can go back. I'm enough here. Hagrid also seemed to dislike Filch and drove him away. Advertisement leading the little wizards and his hound Fangya. He walked towards the Forbidden Forest. When coming to the entrance of the Forbidden Forest, said Hagrid, the centaur told me that I don't know any monsters recently, and they are hunting unicorns. But the Forbidden Forest is too big, and I can't finish the inspection by myself. Now let's check the periphery of the Forbidden Forest together. We will be divided into two teams after the execution. One team will follow me, and the other team will be led by Richard. Which team do you plan to join? In order not to interfere with the development of the plot, Richard did not speak, but waited for them to divide into teams. How dare they? How dare they treat me like this? I will tell my father. Malfoy was still muttering about looking for his father. Malfoy, you want to stay with me, or with Fangya? Seeing that Malfoy was still nagging, Hagrid urged. Looking at the mighty hound Fang, Malfoy immediately said, I want to be with the hound. Are you sure? You have to know that Yaya is actually very timid. The honest Hagrid still told the truth. No, you must be lying to me. I'm going to be with the hound. Looking at Fang Fang, who was as strong as a pony, Malfoy insisted. Okay, I'm with Ronald, Hermione, Richard, Harry, and Malfoy. Take Fangya with you. Be careful in the Forbidden Forest. If you encounter danger, run away immediately and send out a signal. Don't worry too much. As long as there is something wrong, I'll find it soon. Richard, I heard Dumbledore talk about you. Please keep an eye on them. Richard quickly agreed, but Richard wanted to say that he should be the most dangerous of the three. Harry is the savior, the child of destiny, and Malfoy also has a historical mission. As long as he doesn't die, his life will definitely not be in danger. In this way, two teams of 6 people and a dog march towards the Forbidden Forest. Voldemort, I'm coming. Are you ready? Chapter 29. Thank you, Jackdaw, for your monthly ticket. Thank you for the great reward text. The Forbidden Forest is located on the edge of Hogwarts, and there are all kinds of magical animals living in it. In the novels that Richard read in his previous life, there are hippogriffs, thestrals, centaurs, unicorns, the acromantula, etc., not to mention the Mount of Voldemort. Quirrell will also appear in it from time to time. It can be said that it is very dangerous to enter it, so Richard has never made a move here. Taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Richard the First planned to try to get in touch with as many magical animals as possible under the premise of ensuring my own safety. Not to mention unicorns, I must touch them. Under the leadership of Hagrid, the crowd walked into the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest. So far, there are still no problems around the Forbidden Forest. There are many traces of Hogwarts personnel, such as Slytherin scarves, Gryffindor courtyard emblems, and some snack packaging are scattered on the ground. Let me go. Why is there a barbecue grill? This should be put here by the little muggle wizard of Hufflepuff. I don't know which college's students stayed here. I tried it a few times, and the processed food is not bad, but I haven't disposed of it yet. Seeing everyone looking at the grill, Hagrid said casually. Then there is the Hogwarts farm, where thestrals and hippogriffs are also raised. Maybe it was because they were used to the appearance of wizards, or maybe Hagrid was there. Seeing everyone appearing in the Forbidden Forest, neither of these two large magical animals made any movement. Continue to sleep. Hagrid, can I touch them? They look beautiful. Richard ignored the monster-like eyes of the other little wizards and said to Hagrid what he liked. In fact, except for Harry Potter who saw the thestrals, everyone thought that Richard was talking about hippogriffs. You think they're beautiful too? Richard, you're really a good guy, but it's a pity that you can't. Dumbledore specifically told me that you must never let little wizards touch them. Hagrid looked embarrassed. After all, he finally met a fellow people. They didn't make any unreasonable requests. They just wanted to touch these cute little guys, in his opinion. But as Dumbledore's most loyal subordinate, Hagrid still had to strictly implement his requests. As expected of a Muggle-born, I have no knowledge at all, the arrogant Malfoy muttered in a low voice. However, everyone was not surprised and ignored him. Advertisement, well, wait a few days for the weekend. You can come over here. Don't bring Harry and the others. I will take you to have a look. Hagrid finally let go and whispered, everyone else heard, to Richard. Okay, thank you Hagrid, you're such a nice guy. Richard told the truth. A card for a nice guy doesn't cost money. After this conversation, Hagrid was obviously much happier and kept introducing to everyone the unique plants in the Forbidden Forest, as well as the items and traces left by various magical animals. It's too dangerous. Once you see that kind of magical animal, it's not easy to provoke. You don't want to come here or I'll ignore you. Hermione pulled Richard and couldn't help dissuading him. It's okay. Hagrid is here. I'll come over during the day and call you with me then. Hearing that Richard wanted to call her, Hermione felt relieved. The peripheral inspection was quickly completed, and nothing was found. After a while, we came to the intersection deep in the Forbidden Forest. There are two forked roads here, each corresponding to a different direction. Wow, woof woof. Suddenly, Yaya seemed to have discovered something and ran to the front and kept yelling, and everyone hurried to follow. At this time, a pool of silver-white liquid appeared in front of everyone. This is the blood of the unicorn. Hagrid stepped forward, dipped his hands in some liquid, put it up to his nose and smelled it, and said to everyone, this is the purpose of our inspection. I found the body of a unicorn a few weeks ago. This time the blood is still fresh. It should have happened not long ago, but the unicorn was also seriously injured. Let's split up here, Richard. You take the path on the right, and we take the one on the left. Remember, whether you encounter danger or encounter a unicorn's body, you all send the signal immediately, and I will rush to you as soon as possible. In the past, well, you must protect yourself. After speaking, Hagrid led Ronald and Hermione to the left path. Richard also took Harry, Malfoy, and took Fangya to the right. I don't know if it's a psychological effect. After we separated from Hagrid, the Forbidden Forest seemed to become darker, and I don't know when it was filled with thin mist. The range of light from a kerosene lamp is really limited. This weak light I can't even see my own feet. Compared with the outer area, the depths are more silent, and the sound of small animals can be heard from time to time in the outer area, but there is no movement here except for the footsteps of a few people and Yaya's rough panting, which makes the atmosphere become more terrifying. Darkness and the unknown itself are the root of fear, which made the hearts of the two people except Richard rise to their throats. Advertisement. Harry unconsciously tugged on Richard's robe at some point, which made Richard feel a little bit of regret. He should let Hermione follow him, but he was afraid that without Harry, the monster accumulator, he would not be able to attract Quirrell. Malfoy also lost his arrogance just now, and followed Richard and Harry closely. It didn't matter how far or how long it had passed, Harry and Malfoy's breathing became much heavier, and Richard also became a little more hurried. Let's rest here for a while. Considering that we should meet Quirrell, maintaining physical strength is very important. Running can also run faster, Richard suggested to the two. The sudden sound of Richard startled both Harry and Malfoy. Malfoy was about to curse, but seeing Richard's hazy face in the darkness, he didn't say anything. In this way, the three of them came to a big tree and sat down. Richard, what did you say attacked the unicorn? Harry was obviously a little nervous. As long as he was nervous, he seemed to talk, and at this moment he knew that Richard didn't know, so he had nothing to say. I don't know, but the attacker's condition should not be good. Oh, why do you say that? Harry asked, puzzled. As we all know, the unicorn is a kind animal, and its blood has a strong curse, and its own speed is also very fast. So basically no magical animal will harm it. In this way, only wizards will harm it. After all, unicorns are very valuable. However, this is Hogwarts, where Dumbledore is stationed. What wizards dare to come here to hunt unicorns, unless they are forced to unavoidable reasons? For example, the broken soul wants to continue to accept the curse of the unicorn to become a half-dead, eternally cursed life. Holding the correct answer in his hand, Richard deduced backwards, crushed the truth, and fed it to Harry's mouth. Yeah, that's pretty scary. I hope we don't run into him. Harry only half understood Richard's words at this point, which was that wizards were hunting unicorns. Chapter 30. During the journey to the Forbidden Forest. After resting for a while, the three of them recovered their physical strength. Since they had not encountered any danger, everyone relaxed a little. Wait here. I'll go and have a look. Malfoy, who had recovered, said to the two of them, and then walked behind the tree. Just as Harry was about to say something, Richard stopped him and said something to Harry, and Harry looked at Malfoy and understood. At this time, Malfoy clamped his legs and walked forward shyly. He seemed to have heard the voices of the two, and he didn't forget to take the time to turn around and stare at them. After a while, Malfoy ran back in a panic. The wizard robe was still a little wet. Don't come here, just stay there. You won't pee your pants. Of course, Harry would not miss this good opportunity to taunt Malfoy. Richard, there seems to be a strange movement over there. Ignoring Harry's taunt, Malfoy said stumbled. Is the main show about to begin? Richard hurriedly led the two towards Malfoy's direction. After a while, I heard the sound of something sucking not far away. The three of them quickly hid in the bushes beside them and looked intently into the distance. Some distance away from them, under the blurred moonlight, there was a figure dressed as a wizard with his back facing the three of them, lying on a dying unicorn. Only the hind legs were still twitching. Let Richard know it's still alive. What to do? Richard quickly thought about it. At this time, the man raised his head. Although he couldn't see his face because he was wearing a hood, the three of them could still see glistening silver blood flowing down from the corner of his mouth under the silver moonlight. He was actually drinking the unicorn's blood directly. Ah! Came two yells beside Richard, Harry and Malfoy. Broken and about to be found. Sure enough, that person also heard the voice, stood up instantly, and without saying anything, a blazing flame was fired directly over. Seeing this, Richard went to the market and pulled Malfoy and Harry to escape. At this time, the two also reacted and ran away, even faster than Richard. As for Yaya, he ran away long before the beginning. Those who ran away knew that they were not afraid that you would not be able to outrun the person chasing you, or that you would not be able to outrun your companions. This is definitely not possible, and running all the time will only be used as a target. Advertisement. I stopped him. You guys send a signal and get Hagrid over here. Richard stopped decisively and shouted at the two while casting the iron armor curse on himself, and then cast the Patronus charm on the sky. This time, Richard did not pursue light-focusing shaping, but tried his best to form a beam of light and shoot it into the air. At this time, the wizard had already chased after him. Seeing that Richard dared to stop, without saying a word, he directly shot a green light from the wand towards Richard. Killing curse, I rub it. Do you want to be so ruthless? Richard fell directly to a zombie, lay down on the ground, and escaped narrowly. Master, hurry up. The beam of light just now will definitely be seen by others. If you don't leave, Dumbledore is coming. It's just a few little wizards. It doesn't matter if you kill them before leaving. Richard vaguely heard two voices coming from the wizard's body, which seemed to be Quirrell and Voldemort without a doubt. Dizzy, overwhelming obstacles. Richard got up from the ground and waved his wand at Quirrell, but it didn't work. Quirrell waved his wand twice casually and dispelled Richard's magic. At this time, Harry also noticed that Richard was fighting with that wizard. He actually stopped, drew out his wand, and ran towards Richard. No, brother. What's the use of coming here? And seeing you, Voldemort will definitely explode sure enough. Seeing another little wizard running this way, Quirrell also recognized that it was Harry Potter. Harry Potter. Voldemort, who had been suppressing himself all this time, burst out into a roar. Kill him. You must kill him. Good master. I'll kill him right away for you. Just when they were all paying attention to Harry, Richard took the opportunity to hit Quirrell with a sharp attack without a trace. This is black magic. This little wizard knows black magic. Quirrell screamed. Useless things. Let me take over your body. Yes, master. At this moment, Quirrell's body was instantly wrapped in a cloud of black smoke, and the body of Quirrell, who had just been wounded by Richard, also stopped bleeding. Advertisement. Voldemort cast a spell at Richard at will. Compared to Quirrell's spell just now, both in power and speed increased several times. Richard couldn't react at all, so he was knocked out. hit a tree, and slid down. Fortunately, Richard had already cast several layers of the iron armor curse on himself, and it really was the thickest armor and the hardest hit. Harry Potter, the great savior, the child who defeated the Dark Lord. Today I will let you experience the power of the Dark Lord. Cruciate. Voldemort shot the Cruciatus curse directly at Harry. Just before Voldemort cast the spell, Richard knew he was going to deal with Harry, so he used the flying spell on Harry ahead of time. Just like that, Harry was dragged to his side by Richard before being hit, just in time to escape Voldemort's Cruciatus curse. Damn little thing. Dare to disturb the Dark Lord's pleasure. Voldemort was furious when he saw that his magic had been dodged. Directly cast the fierce fire curse on the two of Richard, and Richard tried to bathe in a clear spring in accordance with the principle of water to overcome fire, but it had no effect at all, and it just stopped the progress of the fierce fire curse a little bit. Dragon's breath? There is no other way but to try this. I saw a raging fire erupting from Richard's wand, and this fire actually blocked the fierce fire curse. It's just some kind of magic. It's interesting how there is a breath of a dragon. Voldemort showed a surprised expression when he saw that his magic was blocked. But soon the fierce fire curse broke through Long Yan's block and flew towards Richard and Richard again. At the same time, due to the magic of Richard and Voldemort, many trees also ignited raging fires, accompanied by thick black smoke, which interfered with the sight of both sides. Seeing this situation, Richard hurriedly dragged Harry to run deeper into the forbidden forest. However, the fierce fire curse is a well-known black magic. As long as there is no counter curse, it will continue to burn. Seeing that he would be overtaken by the fierce fire curse if he ran again, Richard also made up his mind, exhausted all his energy, and released Long Yan again. Dragon's breath. A crimson flame shot out from Richard's wand and quickly hit the fierce fire curse. The moment the two flames came into contact, a huge explosion occurred, and both Richard and Harry were blown away by the shock wave of the explosion. Chapter 31. When Harry was blown out, he hit a tree and passed out instantly, while Richard was not unconscious because he still had the iron armor curse on his body, but a hunger surged up far stronger than last time. Richard quickly took out a piece of beef from the storage and ate it in 3 or 2 bites, but it was not resolved at all. Richard took 2 pieces of chicken and kept eating while looking at the direction they came from. A gust of wind blew past, and the smoke in the forbidden forest was blown away, and the sight became clear again. Richard saw a figure flying over from a distance. It's very powerful. It can actually solve my fierce fire curse, but judging by your state, it should be like this. Now let's see what you can do to stop me. Let me see who you are first. After saying that, Voldemort cast the dementia curse on Richard, but when the silver light hit Richard's head, nothing happened. Voldemort was taken aback. What was the situation? Did he use the wrong magic? Thinking of this, Voldemort solemnly took out his wand and said in spirit. Another silver light flew over Richard's head, but there was still no reaction. Forget it. Even if you have any secrets, bring them to your grave. Before he finished speaking, suddenly a sharp arrow flew over from a distance, brushing Voldemort's figure and flying past. I saw a mysterious creature with the upper body of a man and the lower body of a horse galloping over from a distance. No matter who you are, leave our horse people's territory immediately. You are not welcome here. Dirty creature. A mere centaur. How dare you talk to me like that? Seeing that there were still people blocking him, Voldemort was furious and was about to attack the centaur. Richard. Harry. Where are you? A huge voice sounded not far away. Seeing someone coming again, Voldemort knew that tonight's affairs could not continue. Although he didn't care whether they were present or coming soon, this is Hogwarts after all. As long as there is delay after a long time, Dumbledore will definitely come, and I'm afraid he won't be able to leave if he wants to. So he didn't care about the crowd, and turned into a cloud of black mist and drifted into the distance. At this moment, Hagrid finally came to the scene, saw Richard lying on the ground and Harry lying there not knowing whether he was alive or dead, and ran over quickly, and he breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that Harry was just in a coma. Advertisement for Enza. What's going on? What happened? He asked the centaur after holding Harry and helping Richard up. I just came here too, and I saw one of your human wizards about to attack this little pony, and then you came. Richard, are you okay? How is it? Can you tell me what happened? Just then Ronald, Hermione, and Malfoy also ran over. Seeing Harry in Hagrid's arms, Ronald and Hermione ran over in horror, and Malfoy also showed a disturbed look. After hearing Hagrid's explanation that Harry just passed out and nothing happened, the 3 of them also felt relieved. Go and see that unicorn first. I don't know if it is dead. As for what happened, we will talk about it later. Richard thought the unicorn was dead, and hurriedly urged Hagrid. If the unicorn died, the beating tonight would be for nothing. After speaking, Richard led the crowd to the place where the unicorn just fell. After Hagrid's examination, although the unicorn's injury was very serious, it was not dead and could be treated. Richard immediately stroked the unicorn out of concern. A magical animal has been detected. The magical animal has been knocked down and has no ability to resist. Do you want to start the extraction mode now? In the current state, it is definitely not possible to extract. Let's save it first. This extraction is being stored. The host is requested to complete the extraction within 24 hours. The extraction will be cancelled if the time limit is exceeded. Hagrid entrusted the unicorn to the centaur Forenza. After all, even Hagrid was not accepted by the unicorn and communicated with the unicorn. Instead, the centaur was accepted by the unicorn because they were also a lawful and good lineup. On the way back, Richard was about to explain what happened to Hagrid when a glowing phoenix flew over. Hagrid, Professor McGonagall is waiting for you at the entrance of the Forbidden Forest. The other young wizards will follow Professor McGonagall back to the dormitory. You can bring Richard to my office. Just after finishing speaking, the glowing phoenix disappeared. Advertisement. Richard knew that this was Dumbledore's Patronus. Sure enough, Dumbledore's attainment in the Patronus charm was very profound, and he could use magical animals to convey messages. Richard had no idea about this. Also, does Dumbledore know what happened in the Forbidden Forest? Do you want to talk about how the fierce fire curse was solved? After all, the first time, Harry also saw him use a flame spell to block Voldemort's attack. Fierce curse. Before Richard could figure it out, everyone had already returned to the exit of the Forbidden Forest, and Professor McGonagall was already waiting there. Professor McGonagall was also taken aback when he saw the fainted Harry being held by Hagrid. He didn't expect so many things to happen in the Forbidden Forest tonight. After taking Harry from Hagrid, he hurriedly left with the little wizards. But what Richard didn't expect was that before they left, Hermione took the initiative to come over and hug him, and said that she would find out what happened tomorrow, and then she followed Professor McGonagall away with a blushing face. Hagrid took Richard to the hut first, and then sent Richard to the principal's office. Okay, I'm fine if Hagrid is here. You go to Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, Professor Flitwick. Please search the Forbidden Forest to make sure no one is inside. Hearing Dumbledore's order, Hagrid hurried to carry it out. Clean it up. Seeing the traces on Richard's body, Dumbledore directly used the cleansing charm. That's better, Richard. What would you like to drink? Black tea with honey. I'm still a little thirsty after eating a lot of meat, and now I need to add some sugar. Great choice and my favorite. Dumbledore clapped his hands appreciatively. Soon 2 cups of honey black tea appeared in front of the two of them. Richard picked it up and took a big sip. Ah, so comfortable. Okay, Richard, tell me what happened that night in the Forbidden Forest. Good professor, we were all together at the beginning of the night, and then we found out about unicorn blood, and then we separated. I walked with Harry, Malfoy, and Fong. I don't know how long it was when Malfoy was convenient. Hearing a strange sound, we went to check and saw a wizard drinking unicorn blood, and then he found us, so I asked Harry and Malfoy to report first, and I stayed to block him. Great courage. I'm sorry I can't help it. Please continue, Dumbledore said while applauding from the side. Chapter 32. The rest is very simple. I am not his opponent at all. Although Harry is back in the middle, the two of us can't beat him. Moreover, he was very angry when he saw Harry, as if he really wanted to kill Harry. Then a very powerful spell was unleashed, a flame, as if alive, that would never be extinguished. At this time, fierce fire curse, a very profound black magic. You should not know its anti-curse handle. Let me tell you how you solved it. I don't know. I just saw the flames getting closer and closer. In a hurry, I didn't know why I sent out a flame spell. I could only block it for the first time. He was about to kill us both. Yes, I cast it again. The 2 spells collided and exploded. Harry also flew out, hit a tree and passed out. Then the centaur appeared. Hagrid also came over, saw the man more and more. The wizard turned into a cloud of black mist and flew away. Are you sure it turned into a cloud of black mist and flew away? Yes, Professor. I can see clearly that it turned into a cloud of black mist and flew away. The centaurs also saw it at the time. By the way, Hagrid called him Forenza. You can ask him if you don't believe me. Of course I believe you. But you may not know how scary what you said is. Turning into black mist and flying. This is Voldemort's unique stunt. Seeing Dumbledore's glowing glasses, Richard planned to add fire to him. After all, he was beaten so badly tonight, so he should give him some response. Professor, when you talk about Voldemort, I think it makes sense. Oh, what do you mean? First of all, everyone knows that unicorn blood has a powerful curse. How dare a normal person drink unicorn blood directly? And he is full of hatred for Harry, and what you just said about turning into black mist is Voldemort's unique skill cheats. After a pause, Richard continued to magnify his moves. Professor, do you think it's possible that Voldemort didn't die when he was counterattacked by the killing curse, but survived in some mysterious way? So he needed the blood of a unicorn to maintain his life, but I haven't figured it out yet. Why did he come to Hogwarts? Is it purely for Harry Potter? Actually, the Philosopher's Stone is at Hogwarts, Dumbledore said suddenly. Richard was also taken aback. What does this mean? Trusting me so much, even telling me this. That can be explained. It is for the longevity effect of the Philosopher's Stone. He must want to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Exquisite deduction, worthy of being Ravenclaw's top student. Dumbledore once again showed his appreciation for Richard. Okay, let's get here first, it's getting late. You should be sleepy too. Go back to sleep early, rest assured. No one will be harmed in Hogwarts, you can always believe in this. For some reason, Dumbledore suddenly wanted to end today's conversation, but Richard had already said everything he wanted to say, and he didn't even understand why he said so much to Dumbledore and left Dumbledore to decide the rest. By the way, what Richard said just now, I hope you don't tell anyone. After all, Voldemort has brought a lot of harm to this world. We still need more preparations. After all, we don't know if he has any other preparations. It will make him hide it deeper, but you can discuss it with Harry. After all, their relationship is quite special. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Richard also agreed. Just when he was about to leave, Richard suddenly found a golden bird stand next to the bookshelf in the principal's office. On it was a luxurious, bright red bird, which was similar in size to a swan. It had a long golden tail, and the beak and claws were very long and golden. Advertisement. Richard knew this was Dumbledore's phoenix. Fox? It's so beautiful. Can I touch it? Here we go again. If Hagrid was around, the phrase must be familiar. Of course, I have no opinion, but you have to get its consent. Looking at Fox majestically standing on the bird's stand, Richard asked softly, "Can I touch your feathers? I promise it will be light." Then he looked at Fox eagerly. Fox also looked at Richard. Nothing happened. Slowly Richard was about to give up. Suddenly Fox honked, then flew up, circled around Richard's head, landed on Richard's shoulder, poked his head out, and gently rubbed his beak Richard's face. Richard's first reaction was that it was really G heavy, and then he touched Fox's feathers carefully. A magical animal has been detected. The magical animal is not restrained and has the ability to resist. Please restrain it as soon as possible. It seems that it likes you very much. Over the years, there have been many little wizards here, but none of the little wizards has been recognized by Fox. Dumbledore suddenly appeared beside Richard, stroking Fox and saying, "Really, I also like it very much. This is not perfunctory. After all, Phoenix is the top auspicious sign in Yinhuang besides Shenlong. Okay, you go back, it's getting late." Dumbledore lifted Fox off Richard. When Richard returned to the dormitory, it was already late at night, and the whole dormitory was silent. Although he felt very tired physically and should be going to bed, Richard was lying on the bed, still feeling very excited and unable to fall asleep. Forget it, let's draw a lottery first. Thinking of this, Richard turned on the extraction system in his mind. Storage extraction selection, found the only storage extraction, mature unicorn, 4 times. Whether to open, confirm to open. Whether to use autonomous extraction, don't use it first. See how your character is. If you can take it out, you can save it once. Random charge. Advertisement. 1/4, random selection. Experience value plus 15 2/4, random selection. Experience value plus 15 3/4, random selection. Experience value plus 15. What the hell? The Norwegian Spinosaurus was like this last time, and it is still like this now. Is it really so wrong? I'm going to die. Should I use autonomous extraction for the last time? Now there are still 2 opportunities to choose independently, and one must be reserved for the basilisk, so there is only one left. The best choice is the phoenix, but I tried it in Dumbledore's office tonight, and now I don't know how to restrain it. If it doesn't work, people can set themselves on fire. Suddenly Richard thought, in the 2nd grade, Phoenix set himself on fire after saving Harry, so that was the best chance. In the end, Richard still couldn't refuse the attraction of Phoenix, so let's leave the opportunity to Phoenix. After all, Phoenix has never heard of the second one besides Fox. It is too rare. There should be a group of unicorns in the Forbidden Forest. Chance. Thinking of this, Richard decided to do random, but he had to prepare before doing random. Then Richard took out the dress from the closet and cleaned himself up. Piously pressed the extraction in his mind. Drawing. Experience value plus 15. Destroy it. This non-chief's life. Chapter 33. Hogwarts Response. Meanwhile, Dumbledore thought for a while in the office before operating directly to the Forbidden Forest. By this time Hagrid, McGonagall, Snape, Flitwick had all arrived here. Hagrid first took us to the place where the unicorn was found, Dumbledore said to Hagrid. Hearing this, Hagrid hurried to the front and led everyone back to the place where the unicorn was found. The footsteps of everyone were very fast, and they arrived within a few minutes. Snape and the others took a step forward, exploring around the clearing where a lot of unicorn blood was left. And Dumbledore started to wander around, but if Richard was there, he should have discovered that Dumbledore's footsteps completely overlapped with Richard's footsteps at that time. Dumbledore was observing Richard's battle marks. Especially at the place where Richard released Dragonflame, Dumbledore showed a puzzled expression. Soon the others had finished their survey and returned to Dumbledore's side. Hagrid, you check with McGonagall and Flitwick first. Is that strange wizard still in the Forbidden Forest? Snape, wait a minute. After Hagrid and the others left, Dumbledore said to Snape, let's take a look. How about the magic of the fighting parties? Hearing Dumbledore's words, Snape also carefully observed the traces of the fight. It was okay at first, but when he saw the traces of the fierce fire curse, he showed a surprised look, and then he showed a puzzled look after seeing the traces of Lungyin's burning. It feels like there's more than one person chasing him. From the traces at the beginning, the strength is mediocre. Quirrell said, I don't want to lose face. But to the back, Snape said, pointing to the traces of fierce fire. Starting from here, it should be the use of fierce fire curse, which is quite profound and far superior to mine. After that, Richard sighed. I can't see what spell he used, but there is a very strong breath of dragon. Advertisement, it's basically the same as what I observed, but there should be only one person chasing him, but this person may have more than one soul, and the other soul is very good at black magic. After clicking to the end, Dumbledore released the long yin said. I asked Richard, and he said that he did not know how to cast it, but it was very strange why there was a dragon's breath. Richard's parents should be just ordinary people. Could it be that there are dragon descendants among his ancestors? Every wizard has his own secrets, especially genius wizards. Secrets can make them powerful. Snape also had a deep understanding of this. Fox likes Richard very much. Dumbledore said an irrelevant remark suddenly. Yeah, Richard's Patronus charm is pretty good too. Okay, you should go check it out too. Dumbledore said to Snape suddenly. Snape was taken aback for a moment, then glanced at the trees in the distance, then left with a snort. Okay, come out Forenza. Snape's a good guy. You shouldn't be like this. Whether he's a good guy or not, he has the Dark Lord's mark on him, and we will never deal with such a person. A centaur stepped out from where Snape had just seen. What do you think of what happened tonight? This has nothing to do with us. We horse people don't want to participate in it. We just want to survive in the Forbidden Forest. Oh, yes, but have you ever heard of a saying among Muggle humans that I think is true? No snowflake under an avalanche is innocent. Forenza said to Dumbledore after hesitating for a while. Mars is extraordinarily bright tonight. Those who should have passed away will eventually return. The world will once again enter darkness, and the Savior will shine his light again. This is the prophecy just made by the Centaur prophet. Then can I communicate with your prophets? Of course not. Suddenly, another centaur came out of the dark woods. Ronan, why are you here? Advertisement. The Patriarch saw that you haven't come back and asked me to come out to find you. And let me tell you that we are just a bystander and do not participate in any party. And Dumbledore, if you think we're hindering you, we can move out of the Forbidden Forest and find a new home. Of course not. You are always welcome at Hogwarts, my centaur friend. As soon as the words fell, Ronan took Forenza and ran into the distance. Remember, Mars is extraordinarily bright tonight, Savior, came Forenza's voice on the wind. Mars, war, the dead, Voldemort, the Savior, Harry. These words kept flashing in Dumbledore's mind. There was a firm look in his eyes. The next morning, Richard woke up early and didn't sleep well. Richard even dreamed about the scene where Voldemort floated towards him at the end of last night. During breakfast, Dumbledore lightly touched his glass with his spoon on the professor's chair. and a melodious, crisp sound resounded throughout the auditorium. The little wizards were stunned for a moment, and then they all started whispering. You must know that Dumbledore seldom spoke publicly at this time because of the lack of staff during breakfast. Everyone be quiet. I have something to explain. Some bad things happened last night. Here, I reiterate that all little wizards are not allowed to go inside the Forbidden Forest, even outside the Forbidden Forest. No. For this reason, I will arrange for Hagrid to patrol the Forbidden Forest, and the professors will check from time to time. They are not something you can tease at will. While talking, Dumbledore looked at Brother Weasley. We won't go. We are good students. You have to pay attention to Ronald. The twins argued. Also, because of what happened last night, I have some points to reward. Mr. Harry Potter perfectly interpreted Gryffindor's courage and adventure. When he encountered a crisis far beyond his own ability, he still chose to be with his companions. Let's face it together, and I will reward him with 30 points for this. As soon as he finished speaking, Gryffindor cheered, as if the snubbing of Harry a few days ago was not their fault. Mr. Richard Harris, he dared to take the initiative to stand up in the face of danger and protected his partner. Of course, he also has superb magic spells and extraordinary wisdom. For this, I will reward him with 60 points. The Lords Ravenclaw erupted into huge cheers in an instant. Although it was not as good as Gryffindor's cheers just now, the unique penetrating power of the girls was vividly reflected. Penelo, who happened to be sitting next to Richard, hugged Richard into his arms even more excitedly. A girl's fragrance spread over the face, but the good times didn't last long. Richard felt a burst of suffocation and struggled desperately, and Senior Penelo also found something wrong, so she let Richard go. Just when Richard was hugged by Penelo, two eyes shot from Gryffindor's dining table. Chapter 34. After breakfast, the little wizards of Gryffindor surrounded Harry Potter, wanting him to tell about what happened in the Forbidden Forest last night, but Harry passed out afterwards, and when he woke up, he was already lying in the school infirmary. What happened? Things he does not know. It was just seeing Richard's spell and the mysterious man's spell explode before he passed out, but that alone could make the little wizard of Gryffindor adore Richard. Although Harry had already spoken many times since he woke up this morning, there were still little wizards who asked Harry to repeat the speech, which gave Harry a headache. He's really showing off, Ronald said sourly from the side. Richard probably didn't want to do this either. You don't know how dangerous it was last night. If Richard hadn't saved me, I would have been killed by that man, Harry explained for Richard, and you see, he must be very distressed now. That's not necessarily the case, maybe. He enjoys the current situation. Looking at Richard surrounded by a group of hawks and swallows, Hermione took a bite of the bread. Okay, I'm done eating. I'm going to the library to do my homework first, and you guys hurry up. I won't copy your homework this time. Looking at Hermione, who suddenly stormed away, the two of Harry couldn't help but shudder. Thinking that I haven't done my homework this week, I suddenly understand what it means to be unable to swallow. At this time, Richard was also in pain and happiness. When he first came, Richard was still quite hungry, so he had already eaten a lot. After Dumbledore finished speaking, the little witches of the lower grades pushed Miles aside, then began feeding. It was okay at the beginning, someone brought things, and it was still a cute young lady, which made Richard feel relaxed and happy, but it was not enjoyable after that. As long as you reject one, she will stare at you with big, tearful eyes. The pressure is so great that she can only continue to stuff it into her mouth as a last resort. Under the vicious circle, Richard can't bear it anymore. Okay, Richard is full. I have something to ask him. You guys go first? At this time, Penelo's voice sounded from the side, and Richard heard it like the sound of heaven. Prefect Penelope is still very prestigious in Ravenclaw, and these little witches in the lower grades have left obediently. Thank you, Senior. What can you do with me? You don't blame me for being nosy. Penelo looked at Richard with a smile. Of course not. I really can't eat any more. Richard touched his round belly and accidentally burped his stomach. His face flushed instantly. Advertisement. Seeing Richard's appearance, Penelo didn't continue to look for Richard, but looked at the scorer on the wall and was stunned for a few minutes. Since I came to Hogwarts, the champion of the school every year has been Slytherin. I am now in the 5th grade. I will not be the prefect in the 7th grade, so there are only 2 years. Although Ravenclaw is not, I value this, but I still want to leave a college cup for Ravenclaw because your extra points are now 100 points ahead of the 2nd place Slytherin, although we will definitely not get 150 points for Quidditch. But the end of the semester there is still a while. This year is our most hopeful year. Richard, can you help me make this wish come true? Looking at the little wizard who was only in the 1st grade, Penelo understood that only Richard could help her now. Thinking back to the plots I watched in my previous life, this one was a bit difficult. In the end, Dumbledore shamelessly gave Gryffindor extra points. This is the default player. Seeing Richard's tangled expression, Penelo also knew that she was a little difficult for Richard. After all, no matter how talented Richard is, he is only a first-year wizard, and the Academy Cup is not something that can be controlled by individuals. She didn't know that the old be how shameless. Forget it, Richard. I know I'm a pushover, so just pretend I didn't say it and that's fine. Looking at Penelo's eyes, Richard also became serious. Senior sister, although I don't know if I can do it, I promise you that I will do my best, but just now I also said that the Academy Cup is not for individuals, so I hope that senior sister can arrange all the Ravenclaw Cups tonight. Let's discuss these things with the wizards in the common room. Okay, that's it. I'll notify them grade by grade immediately, so that we will be in the common room at 8 p.m. While talking, Penelope burst out with amazing momentum, get up, and walked to the auditorium door. Seeing Penelo full of fighting spirit, Richard couldn't help feeling a little excited. Let's have a match with Dumbledore. Thinking of Dumbledore, Richard, and thinking of last night's conversation, to reveal something to Harry. When Richard looked at Gryffindor's table, most of the young wizards had already left, but luckily Harry and Ronald were still there talking absently, but Hermione was no longer there. Seeing Richard walking towards them, Harry quickly wiped his mouth and said to Richard, Hermione has gone to the library, but for some reason she's a little angry. For some reason Harry felt like Richard had come because of Hermione. By the way, I haven't told you yet. Thank you for saving me last night. It's okay. By the way, Harry, do you have time later? I think I should tell you about something I found out last night. Seeing Richard's serious expression, Harry unconsciously became nervous. Advertisement, it's the weekend now. I have nothing to do. Can you tell me something now? Things are more complicated. How about this, after an hour, you go to Hagrid's hut. I will go to the library first and take Hermione with me. Okay, so can I take Ronald with me? If you insist, I have no objection. After speaking, Richard left, leaving behind Harry, who was still in a daze. What is he doing here? Ronald asked Harry suspiciously. He said he had something to tell me and told me to go to Hagrid's hut in an hour. What is so mysterious? You have to go to Hagrid to talk about it. I don't know either. Don't you know when you go with me? He didn't let me go, so I won't go. You are my best friend, and I will definitely take you with me. And Richard agrees that you will go too. Ronald was his first friend at Hogwarts, and Richard was also his good friend in Harry's view, and he often helped him, not to mention saving his life this time. And the relationship between Richard and Ronald is not good, so Harry has been in a difficult position. Ronald on the side didn't notice so much. He was very excited when he heard Harry say that he was his best friend. Harry, you're my best friend too. Of course. For a moment, it could be said to be full of passion, and even the little wizard who hadn't left silently stayed away from the two of them. Chapter 35. When Richard came to the library, Hermione was already sitting there writing a book. This is what made Richard admire Hermione the most. She worked so hard even though her grades were already very good. At this time, she was going to kill others. Fortunately, she was a completely talented player. A great inventor once said that success is 99% sweat plus 1% talent, but many people don't know that they also said that 1% talent is often more important than 99% sweat. And Hermione is the representative of both talent and sweat. Without continuing to think about it, Richard walked directly to Hermione's side. Hearing someone approaching, Hermione raised her head and took a look. It turned out that it was Richard. Just about to laugh, she immediately turned her face stern and gave Richard a blank look, but still quietly moved a little to the side, leaving behind the person who happened to be sitting alone. Location. Richard didn't talk too much and sat down directly. Hermione's meaning was obvious, and if I was unhappy, she quickly coaxed me. Why are you here? Aren't you very happy there? I can't help it. It's just more popular. Richard waved his hand and revealed a beating expression. Yeah, you see that your prefect likes you very much and hugged you. Hermione pouted and said to Richard, dissatisfied. You're talking about Senior Penelo. That's because we Ravenclaw are about to officially launch an assault on the Academy Cup, and our entire academy will hold a secret meeting tonight. Seeing that Hermione's face became more and more ugly, Richard quickly turned away, opened the topic. I believe that this Hermione should not admit defeat. College Cup. We Gryffindor will not admit defeat. As expected, the attention was diverted, and Richard secretly said yes. Since you are going to hold a secret meeting, is it okay for you to tell me? Little Hermione was still so understanding. It's okay. It's not something shameful. The college cup still depends on strength. Then let's see who can win. How about we make a bet and say that if we win, we can make a request? No problem, of course, and you win as long as Ravenclaw doesn't win the House Cup. Advertisement, you don't need to ask. We compete fairly, and I win only if Gryffindor wins the Academy Cup, and vice versa. If you want to talk, please go out and say, this is the library. If you discuss issues, please keep your voice down so as not to disturb other people. At some time, Mrs. Pants had come to the two of them. The two quickly apologized, and then fell silent, and Richard also pulled out a book by Hermione and read it. After a while, a piece of paper slipped from Hermione's side onto the book. I haven't asked you about last night. Richard carefully glanced at Mrs. Pants, and seeing that she was still at the door, he leaned into Hermione's ear and said, things last night were a bit complicated. I have made an appointment with Harry to go to Hagrid's hut for a while to discuss the details. You come with me. At the beginning, Hermione felt fine, but as Richard spoke, a fresh smell wafted into Hermione's nose, and seeing Richard so close, Hermione didn't know what to think. Hermione's little face was flushed with red ears, yes, like a shy little flower. Seeing that Hermione's ears were red, Richard wanted to take a bite, but thought it would be too irritating, so he sat back. And at this moment Hermione was also relieved, and turned her head to give Richard a look. After the two calmed down and read the book for a while, Richard felt that the time was almost up, so he took Hermione to Hagrid's hut. When the two came to the hut, Harry and Ronald had already arrived, and they were enjoying Hagrid's snack, rock cake, which was a kind of rough surface with some raisins on top, which looked a bit rough, small cakes with irregular shapes. The biggest feature of this small cake is that it is hard, comparable to the hardness of a rock, and normal people cannot eat it. Harry and Ronald obviously belonged to the ranks of normal people, so they couldn't bite it all, but it was hard to refuse Hagrid's enthusiasm, so they could only put it in their mouths with difficulty, and then grind it like a dog chewing on a molar stick. Both were relieved to see Richard and Hermione arrive. Richard, Hermione, you are here. Here are the biscuits I just made. Do you want to try them? Harry and Ronald both like them. No, Hagrid. We just finished our meal and are still full. Bring us a cup of black tea. Hermione just wanted to try it, but seeing Harry and Ronald shaking their heads frantically, they also gave up. Seeing that neither of them would accept his biscuit, Hagrid gave Richard and Hermione 2 cups of tea with a little disappointment. Advertisement, are you sure you want to tell them? They're only first-year wizards. Hagrid seemed to know something. Yes, Professor Dumbledore asked me to tell Harry last night. Since Professor Dumbledore said it should be fine, looking at the two who were playing charades, the remaining 3 cubs were all very curious, looking at Richard eagerly. Seeing that the 3 of them were looking at him eagerly, Richard didn't say anything in the ink, and said directly, last night, I walked the other side of the road with Harry and Malfoy. There, we met a mysterious man. The mysterious man was not afraid of the curse of the unicorn's blood. He just lay on the unicorn and drank its blood. What is the curse of unicorn blood? Hermione, a studious little wizard, immediately asked when she discovered a blind spot in her knowledge. If you drink the unicorn's blood, you will accept the unicorn's curse and become a half-dead, cursed life forever. There was knowledge that he knew, but Hermione didn't. Harry looked very excited and said hastily, Harry is right. This is the first suspicious point, and the next is the second suspicious point. This mysterious man hated Harry very much. When he saw Harry came back to help me, he put me aside and directly addressed Harry. If you make a move, who in the wizarding world would hate the Savior, or hate it deeply? I know that. It must be the Death Eaters. They are the only ones who hate Harry. Ronald snapped back. This answer is not comprehensive yet. Let's talk about it later. Next, there is something that Harry may not even know. Last night, I heard 2 voices from that mysterious man. 2 voices? What does that mean? This means that there is another soul attached to this mysterious man. A soul that hates Harry but needs to survive with unicorn blood, even if it is cursed. After a pause, he took a sip of tea. Chapter 36. Last night, was there anything unusual about your scar? Richard asked, pointing to Harry's lightning scar. It hurts a little, but it's not very strong. It doesn't hurt in the back. Later you fainted and still hurt a pee. And you all know that there is a treasure in the school, the Philosopher's Stone, which can make people live forever. Combine all these things. That's what Dumbledore asked me to tell you, Harry. It's Voldemort. He's still alive, right here at Hogwarts. While the others were still thinking, Harry came up with the answer first. Both Ronald and Hagrid shuddered when Harry said Voldemort's name, while Hermione, who was Muggle-born, didn't respond. Tell Dumbledore, that's Voldemort, and only Dumbledore can deal with him. Both Ronald and Harry yelled. Okay, be quiet. I deduced this in the headmaster's office last night. As for Professor Dumbledore, he must have known about it earlier, so you don't need to remind him. Then why not arrest Voldemort quickly? Of course, it is left to Harry to gain experience, but these cannot be said. Who to catch and how to catch them, I just know now. I don't know who Voldemort's soul is attached to, and I don't know who to catch, but now I know that Voldemort's ultimate goal is the Philosopher's Stone. As long as you keep an eye on the Philosopher's Stone, you will definitely be able to catch Voldemort. It's Snape, definitely Snape. He's been trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone. That's just your guess. Is there any real evidence? I don't think it's Professor Snape. Advertisement, yes. What Richard said is right, and Snape is also one of the professors who protect the Philosopher's Stone. How could he steal the Philosopher's Stone? Hagrid didn't think it was Snape either. However, Harry and Ronald had already decided that it was Snape, and it was difficult to change now. On the contrary, it was Hermione who firmly believed that it was Snape at first, but now that Richard had already met that person face to face, and could still be sure that it wasn't Snape, could it really not be Snape? Richard is sure it wasn't Snape last night, but could it be that Snape was also Voldemort's helper? Hermione asked, good guy, did Teacher C hit your child, or stole your chicken? Richard decided to let these little guys play by themselves. He can't be meddling anymore. He didn't get anything yesterday, and he was beaten up, and he must never do such stupid things in the future. Hagrid, can we go see the Hippogriff and Thestrals? Ignoring the discussion of the three, Richard suddenly remembered that Hagrid had promised him to take him to see the magical animals in the Forbidden Forest, so he turned to Hagrid and asked, it won't work in the past few days. Professor Dumbledore told me specifically that no young wizards can enter the Forbidden Forest, nor the outskirts. I'm really sorry. In a few days, when that mysterious man is caught, I will take him with him. You go, Hagrid said shyly to Richard. Come on, it seems that this semester is difficult. As for letting Richard come secretly, let's forget it. You must have magical animals that have no resistance to extract skills. Judging by the size, it still lives in groups. If this thing is to be subdued, it will definitely cause a lot of trouble, but it is still not strong enough. Following the three excited little ones, Richard also left Hagrid's hut annoyed. When they arrived at Hogwarts Castle, the three boys had to go to the library because of homework. On the other hand, Richard is going to the school infirmary. Although the healing spell cannot directly strengthen his own ability, the continuous use of the healing spell can effectively strengthen the controllability of his own spell, which can be regarded as strengthening in disguise. When he first came to the infirmary, Richard found that the infirmary, which was not closed all year round, was closed. But Ms. Pomfrey put a photo frame on the door before leaving. The person in the photo frame told Richard that Ms. Pomfrey went to St. Mungo. I'm in the hospital, and I won't be back on weekends. Let Richard go back first. Advertisement seeing that he can't come here anymore. Richard plans to go to the room of requirement. He can practice the spell first, and then go to the hidden room to see if he can find any good things. Thinking of this, Richard's interest is high. After all, treasure hunting is a man's romance. I walked back and forth in the room of requirement 3 times, but the door that kept appearing did not appear. This situation shows that someone is using the room of requirement. Richard definitely didn't look at the almanac when he went out today. It's because everything went wrong. He didn't touch the magical animal, he didn't go to the infirmary, and now he can't even go to the emergency room. What is he doing? Richard decided to just wait and see who it was. Just do it. Richard first cast a disillusionment spell on himself, then ran to the corner and squatted down. This wait lasted all morning, and no one came out until it was almost lunchtime, and Richard's legs were already numb from squatting. In fact, when squatting there, Richard also wanted to open it. After all, the room of requirement is not his personal property. Why can he only enter it? If people can find it, they can also use it. In fact, Richard was mainly hit hard yesterday. After all, he has been going smoothly, and he has always been valued by his classmates and teachers. But last night's battle, quarrel at the beginning, Richard felt that he could handle it. Especially in the battle of life and death, he felt that he should be able to split 50-50 with Quirrell, but after Voldemort took over his body, the feeling of powerlessness hit Richard deeply. He never thought that death was so close to him. Especially the smoke dissipated, and the figure floating from a distance even appeared in Richard's dream. This was an experience he had never experienced before. As for his death, he didn't even have time to think about it, so he wasn't mentally prepared for the current situation at all. Today, Richard just subconsciously wants to keep himself busy, without any reason, just wants to do something. Don't stop. That's why Richard must wait until someone comes out. Knowing who it is the obsession he just had. And out came two senior students, a boy from Gryffindor and a girl from Hufflepuff. Richard doesn't know these two people, but it doesn't matter. As long as he comes out, let Richard see and know who these two people are. His obsession will disappear. Chapter 37. After lunch, Richard came to the library aimlessly, not to read books. But Richard knew that the little witch must be here to read books. Although he knew it was meaningless, Richard just wanted to sit next to her, so that a flustered heart could get some comfort. Seeing Richard coming, Hermione moved aside and motioned for Richard to sit down. Do you really think that Snape didn't try to steal the Philosopher's Stone? But he's suspicious. You see, the troll hurt his leg that day, and he cast a spell on Harry. He's just too suspicious, Hermione said seriously. Counting Snape's crimes. That's right, people's eyes can be deceiving sometimes, and often what you see is not necessarily true. At this time, Richard turned into an old riddle man. Hermione just wanted to continue to refute, but saw that Richard seemed a little unhappy, and his mental state was not very good. Is there something wrong with you, Richard? I feel like, I can't say. Anyway, it's not the same as you before. It's nothing. It's just that there are a lot of things these days, so I feel a little tired. Richard knew that Hermione cared about him, but telling Hermione didn't do anything. It could only make her worry. Richard, I don't know why. I feel that you are a little different from before you came to Hogwarts. Now you give people a feeling of distance. I can't explain it anyway. It has an unreal feeling. And even if you come to the library, it feels like you're not the kind who is happy to come. Like to complete some kind of mission. Richard, what's wrong with you? Hermione looked at Richard worriedly. I didn't expect a careless girl to observe herself so meticulously, and she was very moved when she looked at Hermione. Richard with a worried face. That's right. Before coming to Hogwarts, Richard could still integrate into his family very well, and he could truly feel that he was living in this world, and that he was real. But since receiving Hog after Watt's acceptance letter, everything changed because he was so familiar with the world. Richard felt that he knew what should happen every moment. Living in this world, Richard was like as in a dream, without a solid feeling, like a castle in the air. Rootless duckweed. Shuang Shengxiao dreamed of butterflies, and the battle last night made Richard fall heavily to the ground. This is not a dream. Not a novel I read, movies. This is the real world, and I will be injured, hurt, and die. This made Richard wake up, and he started to panic about the world again after he woke up. Looking at Richard's constantly tightening eyebrows, Hermione also knew that there should be something that made Richard difficult to make a choice, but she didn't quite understand. Advertisement. Richard, if you feel that there is something difficult to decide, why don't you go to the professors and ask? Don't we all come to school? Why not ask the teacher if you have any questions? Hermione asked suspiciously. Richard also reacted when he heard Hermione's words. Yes, I can't go back to my previous life, but now I am a little wizard in the first year of Ravenclaw College of Hogwarts School. Nima, I am here to study. You have such a big boss in school hit me. Is there any reason for this? Besides, shouldn't students be the ones who bully me and then go to the teacher? Thinking of this, Richard excitedly gave a sip to Hermione's smiling face and ran out of the library, leaving Hermione stunned in place. Her red face seemed to be on fire immediately. Just now Hermione almost called after making a sound. He quickly covered his mouth and gave Richard a hard look. Who should I go to? According to common sense, I should go to Professor Flitwick. After all, he is the head of Ravenclaw. But if these things happen, have nothing to do with Flitwick, let's go to Dumbledore. Anyway, it won't happen here. He was arrested for leapfrogging. Strolling to the principal's office, looking at the statue of the gargoyle, Richard was dumbfounded and didn't know the password. No matter what to do, come here, try it. It should be a kind of dessert. Then Richard tried one by one outside the door. Chilled lemonade is wrong. Toffee is wrong. What the hell is fried stinky tofu? It must be wrong. Maybe you should try the cockroach pile. Suddenly a voice sounded behind Richard. Richard hurriedly turned his head and saw an old man with a white beard standing beside him. Advertisement, Dumbledore classroom. I have something to ask you. Is there something? Let's go in then. Cockroaches. After speaking, Dumbledore took Richard to the headmaster's office. Tell me, what is it that makes our little genius look tired? Dumbledore asked Richard after asking the elf to bring 2 cups of black tea and some candy from the drawer. It's such a headmaster. After returning here last night, I didn't sleep very well. I kept dreaming that Voldemort turned into black smoke and wanted me to float over. This made me very uncomfortable. When I came to Hogwarts to study, Professor Flitwick said at the very beginning that Hogwarts is the safest place for wizards. When it comes to the legendary Dark Lord, he almost killed me, and now I'm in a mess. I don't know if I should continue to stay at Hogwarts, and if I continue to study, will my life be in danger? Richard, it was a struggle to get hold of Dumbledore. Dumbledore didn't expect Richard to say that, and after thinking for a while, he said to Richard, "I'm really sorry, Richard. It's entirely my responsibility as the headmaster to put you in such a dangerous situation. I didn't fulfill my responsibility to protect you. I want to apologize to you here. First of all, we're all happy that you didn't take too much damage and that Voldemort was repelled. Secondly, Richard, you need to know that there may be dangers ahead, but you are not alone. Just like last night, you were in danger. Harry knew he couldn't help you much, but he still resolutely, I will face it with you. So no matter what the future holds, you will have like-minded classmates and friends to go forward together, and Hogwarts, whether it is the professors or me, will be your backing. Finally, Richard, you should also know Voldemort's concept. Pure-blood wizards are supreme. His existence is no longer just a matter of the wizarding world. If we don't resist Voldemort, after he rules the wizarding world, it will inevitably spread to the Muggle world. Offensive, even if Voldemort spares the Muggle world. At last you stop his evil deeds, he will definitely retaliate. He is not a man with a big heart, especially you, Richard. Richard, in fact, you don't need to worry about anything. At the same age, there is no wizard comparable to you in the entire history of European wizards. Voldemort just learned much earlier than you. I believe that you will become stronger in a few years. It will shock the world, and Hogwarts is still a place where you can grow with peace of mind. I can guarantee that. Chapter 38. After the old bee's flicker, Richard's mood was also eased, and he was no longer anxious at the beginning. That's right, let's not talk about Voldemort's current state, half-dead, and being overwhelmed by Harry. When Voldemort can really be resurrected, will he still be his opponent? Richard is quite confident about this. Although what happened yesterday was dangerous, even Harry Potter, a real 11-year-old wizard, wasn't afraid. There was nothing to be afraid of as a man with 2 lives. It's a pity that nothing came out of Dumbledore, and I promised him to protect Harry, which is really a big loss. I looked at the gargoyle statue in the principal's office with hatred, cunning. Then Richard went back to the library. He had startled Hermione just now, and it was time to apologize. It's really troublesome. Richard, who was scratching his head at the door of the library, struggled for a long time, and had no choice but to solve it by himself. Fortunately, Hermione was easy to coax. Hermione's anger dissipated after a while. Or Hermione was not angry at all. Richard just gave her a step down. After all, she was still a little girl. Do you really think there's nothing wrong with Snape? Hermione continued the conversation. What kind of problem are you talking about? Richard teased Hermione deliberately. Will he steal the Philosopher's Stone? Hermione continued after giving Richard a blank look. I don't think so. You have to know that Snape is also one of the professors who protect the Sorcerer's Stone, and Professor Dumbledore trusts him very much. If he really wanted to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, it wouldn't be such a trouble at all. He would have done so long ago gone. As for the problems with Snape you just mentioned, I think it's too one-sided. You're defining him as a criminal first, and then inferring guilt. Everyone will have problems. But if you think he has no problems, in fact, many of his behaviors can be explained. Seeing Richard's serious expression, Hermione also began to doubt her own reasoning, but thought about it carefully. Well, sure enough, there was still a problem with Snape. But there's nothing wrong with Snape and everyone else. Advertisement. Richard saw Hermione's expression and knew it had no effect, and it was meaningless to continue the discussion. In the original book, Harry and the others didn't know it was Quirrell until the end. It can only be said that Quirrell's performance is really good, and it can be said that he owes an Oscar. He was a statuette. But then again, Snape was acting like a badass. Even Quirrell said so. Richard decisively changed the subject. Why didn't you see Harry and the others? Have they finished their homework? Hermione also followed Richard to change the subject until no one could convince anyone. I don't know where they are, but I told them that this time the homework will not be copied for them. The exam is coming soon, and they don't know how to study yet. Speaking of Harry and the others, Hermione was like an old mother, full of complaints. Isn't the exam still 2 months away? Looking at Hermione, who was depressed, Richard said cautiously. It's only 2 months, 8 weeks, not even 10 weeks. If you don't review, you will definitely fail the exam. I haven't even finished the first review. Looking at the serious Hermione, Richard couldn't help but sweat. Is this the world of a top student? I, a student god, might not be able to understand it. It's just a pain for Harry. In this way, The two have been in the library. Hermione has been reviewing the lessons of this semester, while Richard has taken some miscellaneous books. Hermione, who knows Richard's learning ability, has not said anything. It wasn't until Mrs. Pinksy came to drive people away during dinner that the two of them came to their senses and glanced at each other with a sense of fulfillment. It's such a good feeling. When they came to the entrance of the auditorium, the two separated and walked towards their respective colleges. As soon as Richard came to Ravenclaw's table, Terry came over. "Come here, Richard. Sister Penelope asked us to have a meeting in the common room at 8 o'clock. This has never happened before. Do you know what's going on?" Hearing Terry's words, Michael and Anthony also moved their heads together. "Advertisement, I do know something. It's not a bad thing. It's hard to say now, but you will know when the time comes. It's not that Richard is trying to be tricky. He grabs points in the first grade. Those in other grades should discuss countermeasures." Hearing what Richard said, although the few people didn't continue to ask, they were still a little worried. So everyone didn't eat much for dinner, so they went back to the dormitory and waited. When Richard finished his meal and was about to go back to the dormitory, he glanced at the Gryffindor dining table and found Hermione lecturing nonstop to Harry and Ronald. Ignoring Harry's eyes begging for help, Richard quickly ran away. After all, a dead friend never dies, and Hermione is still very intimidating at this time. After returning to the dormitory, Richard wrote a letter home as usual, and then teased Barnaby for a while before letting him deliver the letter. And the time was almost up. Richard left his dormitory and went to the common room. At this time, basically everyone from the entire academy also came. After all, Penelope is still very popular in Ravenclaw. Seeing Richard coming, Penelope nodded to him, looked around, saw that basically everyone was here, and clapped his hands without waiting. At this time, all the little wizards who came to the common room looked at her. "Thank you for taking the time to come here. Here I would like to thank you all. The main reason for asking you to come here this time is one thing. That is, I hope we can hit the Academy Cup this year." Hearing Penelope's words, the little wizards started talking about it. The Academy Cup. Ravenclaw really doesn't care about this. They care more about the competition of wisdom and personal growth. Yes, Penelope is also such a person, so she hopes to win the Academy Cup when she is a prefect. Therefore, when they heard Penelope's speech, everyone disagreed. "The College Cup doesn't mean anything to us." Richard suddenly spoke up, and the other little wizards also showed their approval. Penelope signaled Richard to continue talking. She knew that since Richard agreed, she would not betray the water temporarily, so there must be other meanings. "However, I would like to see if we can win the Academy Cup, regardless of the 150 points in the Quidditch match." Hearing what Richard said, the other young wizards also showed interesting expressions. Chapter 39. If Ravenclaw can win Quidditch, Richard can let Ravenclaw win the Academy Cup without others, but Ravenclaw winning Quidditch is undoubtedly a dream. Not to mention the cheating Gryffindor, even the non-violent Slytherin, Ravenclaw can't win. As for the Hufflepuff led by Cedric, it is not comparable to Ravenclaw. So let's just release Quidditch first, so as to arouse the interest of the little wizards. Seeing the interested expressions of the little wizards, Penelope also hurried to strike while the iron was hot. "That's right, let the other academies take a look. We Ravenclaw don't want the Academy Cup. This time we will take it first, and let the 3 academies grab it by themselves in the future." Seeing that everyone agreed, especially the leaders of several ages also agreed, Penelope began to assign tasks. In fact, the main reason is that there are students who are good at each course, except potions, which are just Slytherin's private plots, at all ages. They used to answer questions at will, but now they can only answer. Another strategy is to try to change people to answer. One person should not answer too many in a row, and let other colleges answer some from time to time. Otherwise, the bonus points will decrease, and the rest is to answer in a certain school. A wizard with great expertise in the field can write a thesis as soon as possible, which is a lot of bonus points, but the difficulty factor is too high, and only a few particularly outstanding wizards in the senior grades can do it. As for the deduction of points, there is nothing to worry about. The little wizards of Ravenclaw are relatively well behaved, and there is very little deduction of points. Richard knew that was all they could do, and the rest was up to Dumbledore. As long as they didn't add too much points to Gryffindor at the end, it shouldn't be a big problem. In fact, the little wizards of Ravenclaw have deliberately ignored one thing. That is, if they snatch the Academy Cup this time, they will interrupt Slytherin's 7 consecutive championships. I have to deny it. Originally, Ravenclaw would not do such a thing that harms others and does not benefit oneself. After all, the pure-blood family wizards of Slytherin are still the most powerful in the wizarding world. After they leave Hogwarts, they often have to look up to pure-blood nobles. If Penelope simply proposed it, then the lower grades might respond, but the young geniuses of the upper grades would definitely not agree. Not being a traitor is their bottom line. But Richard raised it differently. His talent was obvious to all. From their point of view, Richard was basically the next Dumbledore or Grindelwald, at least at Voldemort's level. So since he wants to win the Academy Cup, he can cooperate. Advertisement Penelo also knew that his weight was too light, and he might not be able to talk to the seniors, so it was very wise to find Richard first at the beginning. And anyway, as a Muggle-born wizard, she was already discriminated against by pure-blood families, so she might as well improve her Hogwarts resume to see if she could follow the route of the Ministry of Magic. Richard didn't think about these things. He didn't even care about Voldemort. Now Voldemort doesn't care about you either, and he was afraid of some pure-blood nobles who annoyed Richard and killed him directly in the future. In this way, everyone reached an agreement in the evening meeting. Although the content was relatively monotonous, it was still time-consuming. Seeing that many little wizards were a little sleepy, Penelo ended the meeting. Before everyone left, especially Gao the little wizard in the grade even came over to say hello to Richard, obviously saying that you should remember that we are doing this to save face. Seeing the little wizards leaving the common room one after another, Penelo also came over. Thank you so much, Richard. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid they wouldn't agree. Penelo, who has always looked at people with elegance, was also sitting on the sofa with a tired look. Richard, do you know my background? Although he was speaking to Richard, it was more like talking to himself. My mother came from a family of wizards, of course not a big family like the 28 pureblood nobles. Later, she met my father, and my father was just an ordinary person. The two fell in love just like that, but her father was a pure-bloodist. He firmly disagreed with this marriage, and her mother refused to marry without her father. So her mother was kicked out of the house by her father, and she made a vow not to have any contact with each other until she died. When I was a child, I often saw my mother crying holding a picture of my grandmother. Later, when my mother died of illness, she told me that she hoped to be buried in the place where she was born. Later, my father took me to my mother's old place. I begged that man to bury my mother in the family, but that man not only refused to agree but also severely humiliated my father. Later, when I received my acceptance letter from Hogwarts, I swore that I would make that man bow down and beg me to take my mother back. In order to achieve this goal, I had to become a wizard. I don't have your talent as a half-blood wizard. Only by going to the Ministry of Magic and holding an important position can I achieve my goal. For this, I have been working hard. I became a prefect in the 5th grade, and I will run for the female president of the student council. If you can get more honors during school, I believe you will have a better promotion in the Ministry of Magic. So this time I really want to thank you, Richard. Hearing Penelo's self-report, Richard didn't say anything, and some of the unhappiness that Penelo took advantage of this time dissipated. But to be honest, Richard didn't approve of Penelo's plan. To be honest, Richard felt that although Penelo's plan sounded reasonable, in this decadent world of wizards, a wizard of mixed blood would not be able to become a senior member of the Ministry of Magic without extreme strength, let alone. Although her mother's family is not one of those top-notch families, she must have her own contacts for so many years. It is basically impossible to complete her plan. Advertisement, but Richard didn't say anything. These can be said to be what Penelo has always insisted on, and there is no need to hit others. Richard, with your ingenuity, you can definitely see that I have actually used your influence. What influence, senior sister? You think too much. I don't care about these things. After a pause, Richard continued, sister. If I really have influence in the future, I can try to help you. Hearing Richard's words, Penelo, who has always been strong, couldn't help but his eyes became moist, and he turned and hugged Richard. In fact, Penelo also understands that it is difficult to complete her own plan by herself. Originally, Percy Weasley has been pursuing her, but she has been hesitant. Although Percy is also very good, and even said that she is better than herself, but she has never had any feelings for Percy. If it hadn't been for the consideration that Weasley is also a pure-blood family, which would be very helpful to her future development, she would have rejected Percy a long time ago. If Richard is willing to help him now, then he doesn't have to wrong himself. Richard also knew that Penelo's external strength was just to cover up his own weakness, and his promise made Penelo temporarily put down his disguise, so he let Penelo hug him without struggling. Suddenly there was a sound of Lynn opening the door. Penelo quickly let go of Richard, bowed his head and whispered thank you before fleeing. Chapter 40. The next day, when Richard was about to go to the restaurant for dinner, just as he walked to the door, a little wizard from Hufflepuff happened to come out. After seeing that it was Richard, he smiled at him and said to him, "Come on." Richard, who was still confused, just entered the auditorium when he found that the young wizards of the other 3 colleges were looking at him. The little wizard of Hufflepuff was okay, and the expressions he showed were basically encouraging and cheering. However, the wizards of Slytherin looked at Richard as if they saw the killing of their father and enemy. If their eyes could kill, Richard would have died countless times. In fact, it is no wonder that this is the critical moment for them to win the 7th consecutive championship. 7. This number is a very special number in the wizarding world. They all believe that this number contains special magic power, so they all value this Academy Cup. Now Ravenclaw, especially Richard, has publicly announced that they will snatch their 7th consecutive championship, all that a Slytherin can't tolerate. To be honest, Richard is a bit regretful now. Impulsiveness is indeed the devil, and he shouldn't have agreed to it. Wouldn't it be good for Dumbledore, Harry, and Gryffindor to be the villain at first? But now he has become the first bird. Thinking of Gryffindor, Richard couldn't help but feel a headache for this college. Don't you have any self-knowledge? Don't you see for yourself what kind of bear you are? Can you touch the Academy Cup? As long as Dumbledore doesn't interfere, it's Hufflepuff both are more likely than Gryffindor to win the House Cup. Look, Gryffindor still dares to stare at himself now, and Richard is not the person who cares about children, so he stared back with more fierce eyes. Huh? If it's Hermione, forget it. Forget it, these are all scumbags. So what if the young master is still being targeted by Voldemort? Terry pulled Richard down to sit next to him. I don't know why, but when we came here, we heard discussions from other colleges, saying that you told our college students that this year's College Cup already belongs to Ravenclaw, so that other colleges don't have to grab it. Someone must have leaked the secret. Miles answered from the side. Advertisement, it doesn't matter. It's not a shameful bad thing. Besides, they will know sooner or later. We just want them to watch us win the Academy Cup. All the seniors have seen it. I don't know who made the incident public. Now the whole school knows that we are going to compete for the Academy Cup. I think it will have a bad impact on everyone present if we don't win it. Everyone can take care of it, think about it. Seeing this happening, Richard simply expanded the attack surface to the height of the entire academy. If everyone just gave Richard a face last night, now they have to consider the impact of this incident on the entire academy. Seeing everyone's cautious expressions, Richard and Penelo looked at each other with satisfaction. After breakfast, Professor Flitwick called Richard and Penelo into the office. Penelo, what's going on this time? Are you planning to compete for the Academy Cup? Professor Flitwick actually knew the situation of Ravenclaw very well, because he himself was a wizard from Ravenclaw. He knew that Ravenclaw had always ignored the Academy Cup, and it was a real disregard. So Ravenclaw had never won the Academy Cup since the establishment of the school. Professor, I brought it up. It was mainly once in class that Slytherin said that we Ravenclaw didn't care because we couldn't get the Academy Cup. Richard immediately took the words out of thin air, and Slytherin got up. It's nothing. Let them talk if they want to. Professor Flitwick was quite generous. Yes, I didn't plan to do anything at the beginning. After all, people in Slytherin are mean-spirited. 2 days ago, I had a sudden idea and just took the Academy Cup. It's not a waste of time anyway, so I went to Penelo. Senior sister said something. Senior sister asked everyone to have a meeting to talk about it in order to support me, but I don't know why someone said it and now everyone knows. Advertisement. Richard knew that if Penelope meant it, then he would have more opinions on her. But he was different, not to mention that his talent is more valued by the school. Just say that he is a little wizard in the 1st grade, is the grade that should be thrown around, and people hate dogs. Although I am smart, cute, innocent, beautiful, elegant, and refined, shameless, everyone will forgive me for occasionally doing impulsive things. Hearing Richard say that, Professor Flitwick didn't say anything. Yes, Slytherin has always won the House Cup all these years, and Snape's shameless extra points for this is really disgusting. Since you have all planned it, then I will not say anything. But you must know that since everyone knows it now, the Academy Cup must be won this time, and there must be no mistakes. The honor of Ravenclaw cannot be defiled. Seeing Professor Flitwick's serious expression, Penelo regretted it a bit. How could he have risen to the height of the Academy's honor just because he wanted to win the Academy Cup? Seeing that Penelo's face was getting worse and worse, Richard quickly told Professor Flitwick that he was going to discuss the next action plan with Senior Penelo, and pulled Penelo out of the office. Sister, you can't back down at this time. But don't worry, it shouldn't be a big problem. Looking at the confident Richard in front of him, Penelo was also infected. Yes, it's already at this time. It's useless to think too much, and I can only do my best. Seeing the figure of Penelo leaving, Richard also hurried to the classroom. This is the time to score points. If he, the initiator, considered, deducts points first, it would be a slap in the face. This morning's class was herbalism, taught by Sprout, head of Hufflepuff, a short witch with flowing gray hair. She usually wears a thick patched hat and is covered in dirt, because she always stays in the greenhouse and arranges flowers and plants. She is an optimistic and compassionate person, a standard Hufflepuff who cannot be in a standard. Soon the class was over, and Richard also got all the extra points he could get with satisfaction. I don't know if Professor Sprout also knew that as long as Richard raised his hand, the professor would let him go back, but Professor Sprout, he is also a very fair professor. Even if Richard answers the questions later, he will not get extra points. This has already made Richard very happy. Chapter 41. Over the past few days, Ravenclaw's score has been steadily increasing. At dinner this evening, they looked at the scoring gems. Slytherin had caught up quite a bit. Everyone in Ravenclaw was a little suspicious. It shouldn't be. During the meal, the students of several grades gathered together, and only then did they know the whole story. It turned out that the Snake King actually made a move. Although no points were deducted from Ravenclaw, the extra points given to Slytherin were even more exaggerated than before. That's why Slytherin's score increased much faster than Ravenclaw's. Professor Flitwick must be called in at this time. Seeing everyone's frowning faces, Richard was the first to propose. If this continues, we will soon be caught up. Professor Flitwick won't give us extra points like Professor Snape, said a little wizard. We don't want Professor Flitwick to give us more points, but we want him to go to Snape or Dumbledore to make the game fairer, Richard explained. Then I'll go to the professor this time. Auric, the basically invisible male prefect of Ravenclaw, took the initiative to take over the task. When dinner was over, a Slytherin schoolgirl approached. Richard, can I have a chat? First of all, I don't know you, and second, I don't think I have anything to talk to Slytherin about, Richard refused. I'm Slytherin's prefect, Gemma Foley, but this time I'm looking for you. Not representing Slytherin, or not completely representing Slytherin. I just want to talk to you about some things. Hearing what the female prefect said aroused Richard's interest, so he followed Gemma Foley to the side regardless of the objections of his classmates. Advertisement. Just now I said that I don't fully represent Slytherin, because they do hope that I can persuade you to give up this year's Academy Cup. It's impossible, and you Slytherins don't need to be afraid. You still have Quidditch. As long as you win Quidditch, that's 150 points. You still have an advantage. Slytherins are not afraid of any challenge. Well, I've told you what they want me to say, and now I just want to communicate with you on behalf of the Foley family. The Foley family? Richard said that he had never heard of such a family. Yes, the Foley family. Our family is from Hampshire, and everyone in the family lives there. We have always been the best of the 28 pure-blood families before, and the Malfoy family is only our subsidiary family. But I don't know when our clansmen fell under a strange curse. Gradually, there were more and more squibs in the family. By the time of my great-grandfather, all of them except the direct descendants were squibs, and my great-great-grandfather once approached Cassandra Trelawney, Professor Trelawney's great-grandmother, a real prophet, and under her guidance, the family came to the current welfare village. Sure enough, after arriving here, the family has never given birth to squibs, but new problems have also appeared. After the age of 18, as long as the adults in the family live outside for a period of time, their magic power will be permanently reduced. The longer it is, the greater the reduction, and if the magic power is completely gone, it will consume vitality until death. It's very miserable, but what does it have to do with me? Richard became a little impatient after listening for a long time. Sorry, I don't know exactly why, but my father, the current welfare patriarch, informed me yesterday that I would invite you to my house during the holidays. I'm sorry, I need to go home during the holidays, and I don't have time to go to your house. Please convey my thanks to your father. Richard felt a little baffled. The boy had to protect himself when he was away from home. He had to go home by himself when he first met. What is this for? Hearing Richard's refusal without hesitation, he turned around and prepared to return to the auditorium. Gemma Welfare was discouraged, but she also understood Richard's determination. After all, she would not agree to it in this situation. I heard that you like fantastic beasts very much, and I wanted to take you to see the unicorn, Gemma Foley said to himself, but unexpectedly hit Richard's weakness. Hearing the word unicorn, Richard immediately felt that these two legs were a little unable to move. Advertisement. He jumped back in a jiffy, startling Gemma. What happened? Sister, just tell me when. I will definitely be there. Gemma was taken aback for a moment. What does this mean? Why did she suddenly agree? Before Gemma could say anything, Richard went on to say, but senior sister, it's like this. I definitely won't go alone. In this way, I will bring someone to go there. I don't know if it's okay. Of course, my father said when he notified me that you can go as many people as you want, as long as you think it's okay. At that time, the family will have other things, which will definitely satisfy you. The time will be on the first day of August, a Sunday. Seeing that Richard agreed, Gemma left contentedly. As for the Academy Cup, let's not talk about that. In fact, they have also discussed it within Slytherin. The chances of Ravenclaw winning the Academy Cup are actually not high. In fact, the difference is very small, plus they have the confidence to win the Quidditch match. 150 points is not so easy to surpass, so there is no need to talk to Richard about this, or he will go back on his word, and it will not be good for Gemma to go home explain. On the other hand, Richard became suspicious. So good? Richard was a little confused about what he was going to do, but he had to go on this trip with Cheelin. But when the time comes, who will I find to accompany me? Dumbledore? Forget it, their relationship is not so good. Let's go to Professor Flitwick, but it will take a while. It's better to go to him after Ravenclaw wins the Academy Cup. As for whether Professor Flitwick has time, Richard has also considered it. He heard from Senior Pinello that Professor Flitwick usually stays at Hogwarts during the holidays, or studies spells with a few friends. I won't be going home, so I should have plenty of time. But it's better to improve your own strength before going. This is the fundamental. If there is something else, no one else has time to help him. However, my current level of magic spells should be at a bottleneck. Although Richard's current magic power is only slightly different from that of a normal Hogwarts graduate, after all, he must have learned more spells in 7 years. But in terms of depth, the spells that Richard has mastered now, except for the Patronus charm, can already be compared with outstanding graduates. But magic power cannot grow in a short period of time. It can only grow with age. Chapter 42. Forget it, let's go to Hagrid's place tomorrow when there is no class. See if there are any magical animals that may be encountered. After thinking for a long time and having no idea, Richard could only go back to the dormitory to sleep. The next afternoon, Richard went directly to Hagrid's hut after eating without taking a lunch break. At this moment, Hagrid just came out of the Forbidden Forest with a huge wooden barrel in his arms. Richard, why are you here? Seeing Richard coming, Hagrid asked curiously, and then suddenly remembered something, with a hint of embarrassment in his vigilance. Let's talk about Richard first. I really can't take you to the Forbidden Forest now. Dumbledore trusts me and entrusts me with such an important task. I can't violate it. Seeing Hagrid's meticulous appearance, Richard was amused for a while, but he also admired Hagrid's dedication. No, Hagrid, I didn't come to ask you to take me to the Forbidden Forest. I came to ask you, what happened to the unicorn we got in the Forbidden Forest last time? Hagrid was also relieved to hear that Richard didn't offer to take him to the Forbidden Forest. Hearing the unicorn, Hagrid let out a hint of genuine liking. It's almost ready. Do you want to see it again? Then he looked at Richard expectantly. Of course I do. Can I still see it now? Firenze told me yesterday that a potion is needed to heal the unicorn, and that potion will be made by Professor Snape, and Professor Snape needs to see the unicorn's injuries first. So Firenze will put the unicorn in the evening, the beast will send it over, and you will be able to see it when the time comes. Seeing Hagrid smiling like a 200-pound child, Richard couldn't help laughing. Both of them seemed to have forgotten that Richard couldn't leave Hogwarts Castle at night. In this way, Richard waited in Hagrid's hut until the evening, and even had dinner with Hagrid. Under normal circumstances, Hagrid should also eat in the auditorium, but in order not to miss the Firenze, Hagrid specially brought the dinner back. After the two had dinner, Firenze came with a unicorn in a short while. Advertisement, and this unicorn seemed to recognize Richard, and after coming over, he seemed very close to Richard, kept rubbing his head against Richard, and stuck out his tongue to lick Richard's face from time to time. This damn charm. Even a unicorn can't escape. This made Hagrid very envious, and he also tried to move forward to pet the unicorn. But when the unicorn saw the giant approaching, it immediately bit Richard's clothes and backed away. Hagrid was very sad about this, and felt extremely wronged. At this moment, Firenze suddenly raised the bow and arrow in his hand, and looked into the distance. Take it easy, that's Professor Snape. He's here to see the unicorn's wounds and prepare the potion. Hagrid hurriedly stopped him. Hearing that it was Professor Snape, Firenze became even more nervous than before, and the hand holding the bowstring was about to let go. All right, Firenze, this is Hogwarts. You can't do anything to a Hogwarts professor. An old voice also sounded at the right time. Turns out Dumbledore was here too. After taking a look at Dumbledore, Firenze said to Hagrid, "The unicorn is on your side first, and I will pick it up after it has taken the medicine." He handed Hagrid a bone flute, and then quickly ran back with 4 long legs. Forbidden Forest. At this moment, Professor Snape also came over with a gloomy old face. Seeing that Richard was actually in Hagrid's hut, a gleam flashed in his eyes. Richard, you are actually on the edge of the Forbidden Forest at this time. As a professor at the school, you will be deducted 50 points. Richard was dumbfounded when he heard this. Isn't it? It can still be like this, you old six. Don't be nervous, Snape. Dumbledore stood up suddenly. Richard's not being selfish. You see, he's been right next to Hagrid and he's the only one there to quiet the unicorn. So I don't think he deserves a penalty here. At this moment, Richard felt that Dumbledore was emitting a white light. Seeing that his plan hadn't worked out, Snape's expression darkened again. Then there was Richard holding the unicorn and keeping it still so that Snape could observe the unicorn's wound. Advertisement: this wound is very simple, just an ordinary bite wound. But there is some mixture of toxin and magic on this wound, which makes it not heal even though it does not bleed now. I need some blood from the unicorn wound to analyze the toxin, then make potions. Snape took out 2 bottles from his wizard robes and handed them to Richard. After Richard took the bottle, he comforted the unicorn, and then squeezed some poisonous blood from the festering wound into 1 bottle, then looked at Snape with the other. What is this for? Isn't 1 bottle enough? Using another bottle to fill another bottle of unicorn's blood before the new toxins are born. This is the price of my shot. Watching Richard look at Professor Dumbledore, Snape continued. You can't let a great potion master do it for nothing. This is the rule of the wizarding world, even in Hogwarts. Seeing Dumbledore nodded, Richard had no choice but to continue filling another bottle with blood. In fact, Richard himself can understand, after all, Snape, a dignified potion master, definitely can't get it for free, as long as a bottle of unicorn blood is already very cheap, but just now Snape actually wanted to deduct points from him. So Richard just asked him, disgusting him. It just didn't work. After receiving 2 vials of unicorn blood from Richard, Snape was ready to go back to research. Just when I was about to turn around, I suddenly turned around and said to Richard, this week's night training is ahead of schedule, and you will come and refine the potion for treating unicorns with me tonight? Okay, Professor. I will go to the office to find you after I comfort the unicorn. Before Richard could finish speaking, Snape turned around and left, which was rude. In the end, Hagrid called Firenze back with the bone flute, telling him to take the unicorn away first. There is no way. The unicorn can't get close to anyone except Richard. As long as Richard leaves, it will follow. The unicorn can't be allowed to follow Richard to Hogwarts Castle, although Richard is very willing, but Dumbledore disagrees. What can be said to affect the little wizards to take classes and so on? Richard doesn't want to say, do your little wizards still use others to influence them? So in the end, Firenze was asked to bring the unicorn back. Looking at the unicorn, who looked back 3 times at one step, Richard knew that his chances of going to the unicorn herd to gather wool were much higher. Richard happily returned to Hogwarts Castle with infinite hope for the future. Chapter 43. The happy time was always short, but it was too short. Richard looked at the door of Snape's office and secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then mustered up the courage to knock on the door. A gloomy voice sounded in the room, and it really deserved to be regarded as a villain. Seeing Richard come in, Snape asked sullenly, what configuration should the antidote be used? The main ingredient should be bezoar, which has the effect of detoxification. This is still not difficult for Richard. Except for bezoars, I remember that you should have read the book on making advanced potions, which contains methods for making broad-spectrum antidotes. As I said earlier, Richard retrieved the Half-Blood Prince's notes from the storage, and sure enough, there was an article on the preparation method of the broad-spectrum antidote. Give way. I'm going to pretend to be cleared my throat, Richard said. The materials needed for broad-spectrum antidote are bezoar, mistletoe berry, and unicorn horn. The first step is to put 1 bezoar into the mortar and grind it. The second step puts 4 powders into the crucible. The third step is to put 2 standard ingredients into the crucible. The fourth step is to heat for 5 seconds. Step 5, wave your wand and wait. Step 6, put 1 unicorn horn into the cauldron. The 7th step is to stir clockwise for 2 circles. Step 8, put 2 mistletoe berries into the cauldron. The 9th step is to stir counterclockwise for 2 circles. Advertisement. Step 10, wave your wand. Done. It will take 30 to 40 minutes in total. Since you know everything, why don't you start yet? Do you need me to prepare materials for you? Of course you don't need it. Professor, you should rest first and tell me what's wrong with me. The little coward immediately gave up. I prepared 3 crucibles for you on the table. Tonight you have to refine 3 crucibles. Get the materials from the cabinet yourself. If you take more than 5 crucibles, then you are ready to be locked up. After finishing speaking, Snape ignored Richard, took out the fresh blood of the unicorn that had just been harvested, extracted a third of it, and added it to an unknown potion. And Richard also took the first batch of materials and began to refine the broad-spectrum antidote in an orderly manner. Although Snape didn't know what kind of potion to make, he still observed Richard's actions from time to time, and saw that Richard didn't completely follow the original teaching method when processing the raw materials, but used some self-improved methods. Made Snape feel a little relieved. More than half an hour later, Richard's first antidote was finished and handed over to Snape. Snape looked at the potion in front of him, and it was very satisfying to be able to refine it for the first time. After finding out some places that Richard needs to pay attention to, he rushed Richard to make the second copy. Soon the second part was also made. Snape put the two together, randomly mixed one part with some unknown potion, and then divided the unicorn's poison blood into 3 parts and selected 2 parts pour into it separately. There was a sudden bang, which startled Snape. When he looked closely, the 2 potions on his side were intact. So where did the sound come from? Looking back quickly, at this time Richard had been blown up by the potion in the cauldron. His hair was curly and his face was black. Suppressing his anger, he came to Richard and asked Richard why the explosion happened. It turned out that Richard felt that there was something wrong with the heating time and the order of putting in the raw materials. He planned to try it according to his own ideas, but an explosion occurred. Then, the poison-tongued Snake King started to go crazy, sarcasm and ridicule, and Richard was dizzy. He quickly apologized to Snape and promised that he would never mess around again. Only then calmed down the Snake King's anger. In fact, Snape was not as angry as he showed. He knew that even at Richard's age he couldn't do better than Richard, but Richard's age is still relatively young and his experience is shallow, and he still has some knowledge about potions. There are big shortcomings. It is still too early to change the potion formula now. Next, Richard honestly completed the third broad-spectrum antidote, according to the original method. The off-the-shelf antidote is not very effective against the toxin of the unicorn's wound. I still need to improve it. You should go back first. Advertisement, by the way. You should prepare the books on this list. You'd better finish reading the 2 books I marked next Wednesday night in class. Otherwise, you will definitely not want to see the consequences. Well, you can let's go, by the way, tell Filch. Let him tell Hagrid that the potion must not be made well tonight. It will not be ready until tomorrow. You can't go. If you leave Hogwarts Castle, I can guarantee not even Dumbledore will stop me from giving you another point penalty. After agreeing, Richard ran out of Snape's office in a hurry. It's so cool to have to hide from Filch during night tours, but now I have to take the initiative to find him. I was a little sleepy in Snape's office just now, but I'm full of energy now. Look, look, look for the cat, find a kitten, touch the paws, touch the head, give it a big fight. With weird intonation and Chinese pronunciation, Richard wandered around the Hogwarts castle like a strange college talk. Richard was tired from wandering from the basement to the 8th floor, but he still couldn't find Mrs. Norris and her shit-shoveling officer. This made Richard start to doubt. Could it be that Filch was P************ D off by the little wizards? It shouldn't be. Isn't Filch in the original book very strong? After thinking hard for a while, Richard finally realized that Filch still has a workshop, which is next to the gate of Hogwarts Castle on the 1st floor, and he is still on the 8th floor? In this way, Richard struggled from the 8th floor back to the 1st floor, and finally found a small door next to the main door, which should be Filch's workshop. When Richard came to Filch's workshop, he was about to knock on the door, but found that the door was not closed tightly. But Richard didn't go in rashly. This might be Filch's fishing enforcement, so be careful. Mr. Filch, are you there? Professor Snape has something to tell you. Mr. Filch? After shouting twice, there was still no answer in the room, so Richard had no choice but to open the door and go in. What caught the eye was a small oil lamp hanging from the empty ceiling. The whole room looked very dark, and the room was filled with the smell of grilled fish. Inside is a filing cabinet used to store student disciplinary records. In the original book, it seems that there is a special drawer for Fred and George here. What a wonderful thing. And there is also a drawer here, which says, confiscated materials, highly dangerous. This drawer made Richard's heart itch, and he always wanted to open it to see what good things were there. Mrs. Norris was lying prone on a chair beside the table, and there was another person lying prone in front of the table. Chapter 44. Mr. Filch, I called you outside the house just now, but you didn't respond, so I came in. Seeing Filch inside the house and not responding at all made Richard a little annoyed. Who the hell? Professor Snape asked me to tell you that you need to go to the Forbidden Forest and inform Hagrid that the potion can't be made tonight, but tomorrow. After speaking, Richard walked out. How could Kishio dare to ignore Lord Richard like this? Just after he came out, Richard suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed. People can still say that they deliberately ignored others or fell asleep, but the cat, why did Mrs. Norris not respond at all from the time she entered to the time she finished speaking? This is impossible. Thinking of this, Richard quickly pulled out his wand, first stacked 3 layers of the iron armor charm on himself, and then carefully reopened the door. It seemed that some ulterior secrets were buried under the dim light in the room at this time. Richard directly increased the output of magic power, and there was a fluorescent flash. In an instant, it was like a flash bomb exploding in the house. The whole house was bright as day, and then slowly darkened again. Madam called. Holding Mrs. Norris, Richard checked his breath first, but fortunately he was still alive, so Richard was more than half relieved. Then he walked into the room slowly, standing in front of Filch at an arm's length. Richard called Filch's name twice, but there was still no response. Then Richard poked Filch again with his magic wand. Strange. And Filch just fell on the chair and fell to the ground. I rub. Touch porcelain? Seeing this situation, Richard didn't know if the attacker was still there, but it is definitely not safe to be alone now. The best way at present is not to go directly to Dumbledore, but to find any professor as soon as possible. Here is the closest was Snape's office in the basement. Thinking of this, Richard hurried to Snape's office with Mrs. Norris in his arms. I came to the door of this room again, because Richard was holding the cat in both hands, so he had to kick the door open with his feet. Advertisement at this moment. Snape happened to be holding a herb and putting it into the cauldron. The sudden door opening made him tremble, the herb fell to the ground, and he looked back indifferently to see that Richard was still kicking the door, just about to speak. Professor, Filch seems to have been attacked, and the cat is the same. Hearing Richard's words, Snape suppressed the anger that was just about to explode, and took it to Mrs. Norris, and after examining it, came to the fireplace, knelt down on one knee, took out a handful of flue powder and threw it in. The flames ignited instantly, and then Snape called out to the headmaster's office and stuck his head straight in. Then he drew his head back quickly and dragged Richard to Filch's office without saying a word. The door was open at this moment, and Richard poked his head out from behind Snape to see that Dumbledore had arrived. You guys are here, it's nothing but a simple stun spell. Give me the cat too. Under the dim light, Richard couldn't see any expression on Dumbledore's face, and his tone of voice was very flat, without any ups and downs. After handing the cat in his hands to Dumbledore, Snape wanted to say something, but after glancing at Richard, he tightly shut his mouth. At this moment, Filch slowly came to his senses. Principal, why are you here? Suddenly seeing the cat in Dumbledore's hand, he screamed. Mrs. Norris, what's the matter with you? Mr. Filch, it's fine. It's just under the stunning curse. I've already undone it. It should be able to wake up immediately. You were also attacked by the stunning curse. Can you tell us who attacked you? Dumbledore spoke softly to Filch. Hearing that he was being attacked, Filch was taken aback for a moment, then said angrily, It must be the Weasley brothers. Only they dare to do this. I don't think so. Richard couldn't help but disagree. Although Fred and George have always been naughty, they dare not attack the school staff. Richard paused and continued. Perhaps it should be said that no Hogwarts student dared to do it. I think even when Voldemort was rampant, there were no incidents where employees were attacked in Hogwarts, right? Richard said Voldemort, Dumbledore, and Snape all looked serious. Advertisement, in fact, Dumbledore figured out all these things when he came here. It's nothing more than that Quirrell is a little bit anxious now. But he didn't dare to attack the professor, and he didn't have the ability to attack the professor, especially the professors involved in guarding the Sorcerer's Stone were all at the Dean level. He still didn't dare to provoke him. Physique and giant blood. Quirrell said that although he doesn't know what beating is like hanging a painting, he is not stupid, and the students don't know anything, so the only one left is poor Filch. However, according to Dumbledore's plan, it is not yet possible to scare the snake away. Although he knew that Quirrell had a problem, and even Voldemort was on Quirrell, why did Voldemort die and whether he had other means? The plan was to hang Voldemort with the Philosopher's Stone, to explore the secret of his immortality, and to let Harry grow up a bit. After all, it was prophesied that Voldemort would die at Harry's hands. At this moment, another voice sounded from outside the door. My God, what's going on here? It turned out that Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, and Professor Sprout had all come. Okay, now the deans of all the colleges are here. The thing is like this. Richard found that Filch was attacked. So now I need you to go to the various colleges and make sure that every little wizard is in his own bed. Then ask the prefect to guard the common room and not let the little wizard go out. We need to check the entire Hogwarts castle. Don't say anything specific, so as not to cause them to panic. Richard, follow Professor Flitwick back. Good, Professor. Richard obediently agreed. Richard can accept this result. This is the most correct way at present, but it is not the best. Professor Dumbledore, do you know? Richard followed Professor Flitwick to the door without turning around and said suddenly. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on Richard. Only Filch was still caressing Mrs. Norris, who had just woken up. In Hogwarts, there is a squib. He has no magic. He often uses strict requirements to regulate students, but he is often teased by students. Even on the premise of year-round, he still uses a broom, a rag to guard his duty. This person is today's victim, Mr. Argus Filch. He loves Hogwarts more than anyone else. I know you must have a bigger goal, but what I want to say is, maybe you can lower your noble head a little bit to understand. As soon as he finished speaking, Richard left without looking back, and Professor Flitwick quickly followed. Chapter 45. Looking at Richard's back, Professor Snape's eyes seemed to show a smile, and then quickly filled with sadness. Yeah, look around, people. Like Lily. Lily, she could have been immortal. Snape walked straight to the college lounge without saying a word. Albus, what does that kid mean? I hope you can explain it to me later. Seeing several people leaving one after another, Professor McGonagall said to Dumbledore, and then called Professor Sprout to leave together. Dumbledore was silent for a while, then turned to Filch and said, Mr. Filch, I'm sorry for the bad things tonight, but I promise this will be the last time. And you heard what Richard said just now. Do you want to take a break? No, no need, Headmaster Dumbledore. I'm not tired. This is my home and I'm not going anywhere, and besides, I'm not a squib, really. I'm just not good at magic. Filch hurriedly explained with, I know. Thank you, Filch, and on behalf of Hogwarts, I thank you for your continued dedication. After speaking, Dumbledore even bowed slightly to Filch. Seeing this situation, Filch's eyes were red. He was at a loss and didn't know what to say. And on the way to the lounge where Richard and Professor Flitwick are meeting. Richard, although I don't know what happened tonight and what Dumbledore's plan is, but your words are a bit serious. Professor Dumbledore still cares about everyone. Yes, Professor, I know Dumbledore cares about everyone. But there are times when he, like his best friend, is clearly more concerned with the greater good. Hearing Richard's words, Professor Flitwick knew that Richard must be dissatisfied with Dumbledore, but he couldn't help it. You go first, Flitwick. I'll talk to Richard. Suddenly Dumbledore's voice sounded from the side. Okay, Richard. Make it clear to Professor Dumbledore what you want to say. After speaking, Flitwick left directly. At this moment, Richard could only turn his head and look at Dumbledore. Advertisement, come and walk with me, the old man. After saying that, Dumbledore continued to walk upstairs with Richard. Arriving at the door of a room on the 4th floor, Dumbledore opened the door first, and what came into view was a huge dog, which almost occupied the entire space of the room. The whole body is gray, with 3 big heads and fierce and terrifying eyes. Seeing someone coming in, Lu Wei barked wildly, but Dumbledore simply said to be quiet, and the 3-headed dog got down on the ground, as if it saw something dangerous. Damn, why did I forget this? As long as some music is played, he will fall asleep, and then he can touch whatever he wants. Richard was annoyed, but that was okay. There was still time. This is Fluffy. I borrowed it from Hagrid, Dumbledore explained. After speaking, he brought Richard to the trapdoor, cast lightness spells on himself and Richard respectively, and then floated down with Richard. While floating in the air, he directly cast fluorescent flashes without a staff and soundless, and the Devilton retracted before he came out, and the remaining traps were also easily dodged by Dumbledore. Came directly to the last room. The room was empty, and Richard knew that the Mirror of Eriste would be placed here as a last resort. Professor, what did you bring me here for? Richard, this is where the Philosopher's Stone will be placed. I know, but what did you bring me here for? Are you going to kill me if I tell you a little? I know what you mean just now, but you have to understand that I am already 110 years old. I am already an old man, and I don't know how many years I can live, and Tom is a student taught by Hogwarts. It's my responsibility to give this error a final ending, so I have to be careful to make sure I can kill Tom in one shot, so he can't be resurrected again. And now we don't know anything about his methods, so we have to watch him and understand the secret of his resurrection, which is why you and I both knew Tom was on Quirrell, and I never got a shot at him. I just said, Professor, I know your plan. I'm sorry for what I just said. I always thought you were Dumbledore, and you should be omnipotent. Ha ha ha, Dumbledore isn't omnipotent. If I could, I wouldn't have allowed Voldemort to appear. If we could have given Tom more love, he wouldn't be what he is now. Seeing a 100-year-old man showing a sad expression in front of him, Richard still decided to comfort him. Professor, no one wants to see it at this time. And I have always believed that the school is only a place to teach methods, and what kind of person you will be in the end is your own decision, and although I don't know Voldemort, I think it is possible to achieve what he did. His achievements cannot be changed by others. Thank you for your comfort. By the way, you just mentioned Grindelwald. What do you think of him? I think that although everyone thinks that Grindelwald is the first Dark Lord and Voldemort is the second Dark Lord, Voldemort cannot be compared with Grindelwald at all. Advertisement. Speaking of this, Richard stopped abruptly. No, he can't continue talking. These are beyond the knowledge of a Muggle wizard, and there will be problems if he continues. Go on. Why don't you say it? It's gone. I just read some thoughts about the two people in the school library, and I don't know the rest. Dumbledore took a deep look at Richard, but didn't delve into it. After all, every wizard has his own secrets. Richard has been passable with Dumbledore so far. It can even be said that Dumbledore sometimes wants Richard to be his own heir. Then here, what do you think? Professor, I don't think this is a place to protect the Philosopher's Stone. It's more like a place for little wizards to break through. If you want to protect the Philosopher's Stone, you can take it with you. The Philosopher's Stone is not big anyway. How do you know what the Sorcerer's Stone looks like? Dumbledore asked suddenly. I heard from Harry that he seems to have brought the Philosopher's Stone out of Gringotts with Hagrid. Of course I can't hold the Philosopher's Stone. If I keep carrying the Philosopher's Stone, do you think Tom would dare to come and get it? Dumbledore winked playfully after speaking. And Tom is also very knowledgeable in alchemy. If a fake one is put in, he will definitely be able to perceive it. Seemingly knowing what Richard wanted to say, Dumbledore added in advance. Okay, Professor, I still want to know why you brought me here. It's getting late now, and I'm not you who have to go to class tomorrow. He was supposed to be sleeping, but now he babbled here for a long time without saying anything. Richard was sleepy. Ha ha ha, anyone should do what they should do at any age. You should take classes now that you are a student, and I am already an elderly person. As for why I brought you here, I think you should know. I have no idea. Richard, I'm not worried that you will become like Tom. You have a lot that he doesn't have, and you were born as a Muggle, and you love your parents very much, and I don't see Grindelwald's ambition in you. However, I don't want you to have a bad impression of me or Hogwarts, so I brought you here to make it clear that you should feel better now. By the way, don't talk about what happened tonight. Tell everyone except Harry and the others. Chapter 46. It was late at night when Richard returned to the dormitory. At this time, Penelo and Eric were sitting by the fireplace in the common room and talking. When they saw Richard coming in, they rushed to greet him. Richard, what happened? Why did Professor Flitwick come over suddenly and ask us to check up on the students and not let them go out? Penelo quickly asked Richard. Filch and his cat were attacked. The school must be searching for suspicious persons. It must have been done by Gryffindor, only they would be so reckless. Arik answered from the side. Richard didn't say anything. What Dumbledore said didn't need to cause panic among the students right now. After a few perfunctory words, Richard went back to rest because he was too sleepy, leaving the two of them to continue the night watch. The next day the whole school was discussing who the hero was who dared to attack Filch, but everyone agreed that it must be Gryffindor. And the little wizards of Gryffindor didn't deny it, and were proud of it. Richard knew that this was what Dumbledore wanted to see. A student's prank was more reassuring than a mysterious person committing murder in the school, so Richard didn't make irresponsible remarks either. At noon, Richard called Harry aside to meet the unfriendly looks of many Gryffindors. He didn't come here to tell Harry anything. It would be good for everyone if Harry followed the plan honestly, but telling him too much would be bad. Harry, can you lend me your invisibility cloak? Filch's attack last night made Richard feel uneasy, which is why Richard couldn't hold back and yelled at Dumbledore. Then his own risk factor has doubled, so Richard plans to use the invisibility cloak to strengthen a wave in the Forbidden Forest. Don't you know the disillusionment charm? This is much more useful than the invisibility cloak. I mean, of course you can. Harry asked curiously. By the way, do you know what happened last night? They all said that students from our college attacked Filch. Could it be? Before Harry could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Richard. Harry, you should try to think for yourself about the truth of the matter. Advertisement: The Riddler is online. After following Harry to the Gryffindor's lounge, Richard didn't go in. Now that he was in the Gryffindor's lounge, he was afraid of being beaten. Don't doubt that the reckless Gryffindor could do such a thing. It wasn't long before Richard saw Harry approaching, casually dragging a cloak, and even part of it was dragging on the ground. Seeing the dusty treasure, Richard's heart ached. Following Richard's gaze, Harry looked at the invisibility cloak that was still dragging on the ground, quickly quickly picked up some, slapped it casually twice in embarrassment, and handed it to Richard. Forget it, the child is too young to blame too much. Bah, spoiling things at such a young age requires education. Harry, do you know the Reaper's Hallows? Richard asked. I heard from Ronald that it seems to be the Elder Wand, the Invisibility Cloak, and the Resurrection Stone. This is what happened in The Tales of Beetle the Bard. Oh, I am not. Ronald said that there are many invisibility cloaks. There are many invisibility cloaks. Those are nothing more than travel cloaks cast with illusion spells, or blindfolded, or woven with the hair of invisible beasts. These can be invisible at first, but after a long time, they will gradually appear as real bodies. And the invisibility cloak in the Deathly Hallows can make people truly and completely invisible. The cloak touches the rubber ridge, which is permanently effective, continuous invisibility, and unbreakable no matter what spells are used. And as far as I know, the Potter family has inheriting an invisibility cloak. Looking at the still bewildered Harry, Richard gave up and could only tell himself that he was still a child. After getting the invisibility cloak, Richard put it in the storage around a corner. Feel free to return it to Harry when you're done using it. Richard hasn't tasted enough to cheat an orphan's relic. In fact, Richard has done some research on Harry's invisibility cloak. At least in his previous life, many netizens have also discussed it. Compared with the other two Deathly Hallows, this invisibility cloak has a longer lifespan. It doesn't seem to have any special features, and it is often discovered by others, and it is not compelling at all. The unanimous opinion of netizens is that using this invisibility cloak should be combined with some kind of magic spell, otherwise it is a fake of a retired Auror. You can see through with your eyes. How can you deceive the god of death for tens of hundreds of years? Of course, these are not what Richard needs to understand now. He still has to continue the class and wait for Professor Snape's call. Richard went through each class steadily, answering questions when it was time to return, eating when it was time to eat, and until after lunch, Snape called Richard over without waiting. He gave Richard a bottle of potion and told Richard that this was his final potion. 1/3 was applied externally, 2/3 were taken internally, and half an hour after taking it, he could use the healing spell for treatment. Advertisement. After thinking for a while, there was no class in the afternoon, so I could go to Hagrid's. So Richard went to the kitchen first and shamelessly asked the elves for some meat. Everything is ready, now it's up to fate. When Richard came to Hagrid's hut shaking his head, Hagrid was preparing the food for Thestrals. He saw that Hagrid was carrying a huge wooden bucket full of raw meat, and he was holding a bucket full of blood in his hand. Richard, go to the cabin and sit for a while. I'll take the food to the Thestrals first. Woo-woo, Hagrid's favorite Thestrals, told me it's very hungry now. In order to avoid Hagrid's embarrassment, Richard did not propose to go with him, but obediently came to Hagrid's hut by himself, playing with Yaya. Hagrid returned after a while. To be honest, Dumbledore's ability to select people is really top-notch. A Hagrid and a Filch can definitely be said to be the favorite of the glass boss in the previous life. One person does a few jobs, the salary is low, and he doesn't want to take vacations. It's his own private business. You can also arrange it as you like. The glass boss should find employees in Otherworld. Is the potion ready? Hagrid asked Richard. Yes, Professor Snape said that the healing spell can be used after the potion is finished. Now let's heal the unicorn. However, Firenze told me yesterday that they only come out at night. Hearing this, Richard was dumbfounded. How could it be like this? Why don't you go back first and come back after dark? Hagrid said shyly. Richard was just about to leave when Hermione's voice came from not far away. There's an exam coming up, you haven't studied well, and you still have to run around. Richard, why are you here? Chapter 47. Firenze and Ronan. Seeing Hermione reprimanding Harry and Ronald like a naughty son, Richard felt shuddering. If they were together in the future, would she reprimand herself like this? A picture of San Yang teaching her son unconsciously appeared in his mind, which was terrifying, and Harry, who saw Richard and Hagrid, ran over quickly as if seeing a savior. Even Ronald, who had always been at odds with Richard, looked at Richard gratefully. Let me wipe. This wave is called misfortune? When did these two become so smart? I'm here to deliver medicine. What are you doing here? Richard asked. We originally wanted to ask Hagrid if he knew what happened last night. But since you are here, can you tell me what you mean to Harry? Hermione spoke first. Last night? Wasn't Filch confused by the little wizard last night? Hagrid was not very clear about this matter either. Richard thought for a moment, then asked Harry the question again. This time Hagrid spoke first. After all, he had been at Hogwarts the longest. No, never. Even when that person was at the school, He never attacked anyone at the school. Then it's clear who, except Voldemort, dared to attack the teaching staff in the school. Yes, it must have been him. He must have ordered Snape to do it. Harry felt as if he had been slapped with chicken blood when he heard Voldemort's name, and his spirits rose instantly. But what are you doing staring at Snape with all your high spirits? I can be sure of this. I was with Snape last night. Hearing Richard's words, the three of them were stunned, and an atmosphere that turned out to be a traitor like you with thick eyebrows and big eyes was heightened. I made a potion for unicorns with Snape yesterday. Seeing the expressions on the faces of the three, Richard knew what they were thinking with his A*****. The three smiled awkwardly at Richard. Advertisement, come on. There's another Death Eater at Hogwarts besides Snape. Well, Snape can't get through this. Ignoring the three people self-imagining, Richard planned to go to the dormitory to catch up on sleep and wait until the evening. Just when Hagrid proposed to leave, Hermione and Harry disagreed again. What they meant was that Richard hadn't seen the true face of Snape, and they had to make it clear to Richard, so that Richard should not get too close to this insidious villain. In this way, the whole afternoon was spent in the noisy atmosphere of several people, and finally it was time for dinner, and Richard and the three little ones returned to the auditorium for dinner. After Richard quickly finished eating, he returned to Hagrid's hut. Originally, Harry and the others wanted to follow, but they were persuaded by Richard. Richard had already felt a headache all afternoon. If this continues, he will explode on the spot. But the noise in the afternoon also relieved Richard's tense nerves. He said it was good, but he didn't want it in the future. After returning to the cabin and drinking some tea prepared by Hagrid, Richard urged Hagrid to summon Firenze. It should be that Hagrid also wanted to see the unicorn, so he readily agreed, took the bone flute given by Firenze, and ran into the Forbidden Forest to play. Soon, three dark figures ran over from the Forbidden Forest. Hi Firenze, why are you here, Ronan? Hagrid greeted the two centaurs, while Richard ran towards the unicorn. At this time, the state of the unicorn was much worse than yesterday, and it was haggard visible to the naked eye. Seeing Richard approaching, the unicorn slowly fell to the ground, and weakly put its head in front of Richard, rubbed it, and then retracted. Poor little guy. Hurry Richard to try Professor Snape's potion. Hagrid also saw the weakness of the unicorn, and hurried Richard. Richard took out his wand, first cast the cleansing charm on the unicorn's wound to clean up the leftover blood, then poured about a third of the potion that Snape had given on the wound, leaving the rest let the unicorn drink it, and the next thing is to wait for the potion to work. During the waiting period, the two centaurs came to Richard. Firenze carefully observed the unicorn, and Ronan also observed the unicorn at the beginning, looking at Richard from time to time, and then staring directly at Richard endlessly. This made Richard feel a little shocked, and stared back fiercely, but it didn't work at all. Firenze also noticed Ronan's performance, and looked at Richard curiously. Isn't he just a white and cute human pony? Advertisement, a meteor that was supposed to be fleeting, hung on the night sky for some reason, suddenly burst into dazzling starlight, and then dimmed. Even though it was dim, it was still fixed there, free from fate. Suddenly in Luo after Nan observed Richard, he said something inexplicably to the sky. Hearing Ronan's words, Firenze was taken aback for a moment, then looked at Richard and the starry sky, as if he needed something. Richard followed Ronan's direction and looked at the starry sky. Well, there are many stars and the sky is very dark. Hey, why did I always feel that the sky was filled with smog when I was in the Muggle world? Richard knew that it was a manifestation of air pollution. After all, it was the city of smog, especially now that the pollution of the city of smog had not been resolved in the 90s. But after arriving at the Wizarding World, why the air has become better and the stars can be seen at night is really amazing. No, I was thinking wrong. What did the centaur just say? Am I the shooting star that hangs in the starry sky forever? Firenze, there should be nothing wrong with the unicorn. I'll go first and bring the unicorn back later. Then Ronan left without looking back. Seeing that Ronan was gone, Richard hurriedly asked Firenze, what did he mean by what he just said? Ronan's divination ability is much higher than mine. He can see many things that I can't see. I don't quite understand what he said just now. I can ask for you when I go back. It turns out that you are a scumbag, so forget it and it's not difficult for you. Firenze suddenly took out the bone flute for Hagrid and handed it to Richard. You take this flute. If you encounter danger in the Forbidden Forest in the future, you can blow it, and all the horsemen who hear it will rush over. Other than Firenze, other centaurs generally don't care if they see humans, Hagrid interjected. Yes, as far as Richard knows, it is also described in the original work of the previous life. Most of the centaurs are full of aversion to wizards, which are equivalent to villains, while Bane and Ronin are neutrals. They think that the responsibility of the centaurs is to act a bystander, an observer. There is no distinction between good and bad wizards. Only Forenza is close to human beings. He is not so repulsive to human beings, and he does not hesitate to lend a helping hand. Therefore, the Forenza and other 3 horses are also aliens among the horses, but the horses are very united, and even these 3 aliens live happily. Chapter 48. Immediately the unicorn reacted, lying there neighing in a low voice. Richard hurried over and kept stroking the unicorn's head. The unicorn's wound is constantly draining blood stasis. At first, it was black blood stasis, and then gradually the color of the blood began to fade, and gradually returned to silver and clear blood. I have to say Snape was really good, and the time was really almost half an hour. Seeing that the color of the blood returned to normal, Richard quickly took out his wand and began to cast a healing spell. After 2 healing spells, the wound healed. The unicorn's mental state is also recovering. From just lying on its stomach and not wanting to move, it is now walking around Richard with brisk steps. Hagrid also quickly took out the blood-replenishing herbs that he had prepared earlier and slowly walked towards the unicorn. Seeing the giant walking this way, the unicorn began to howl uneasy again. Hagrid immediately stopped the foreground pace. Richard hurriedly comforted the unicorn, and the unicorn gradually calmed down. Richard motioned for Hagrid to move forward, then took the herb from Hagrid's hand and fed it to the unicorn. Smelling the smell of the herb, he happily ate it after getting up. Du Jiao said that he had eaten up a bunch of leaves with herbs in them, and after drinking some water, the unicorn completely returned to normal, which made Richard envious. As expected of a magical animal, this recovery the ability is simply unmatched. After assuring Hagrid that he would not enter the Forbidden Forest, Richard rode the unicorn and ran around the cabin. There were several times when the unicorn tried to carry Richard into the Forbidden Forest, but Richard stopped them all. Not yet the time came. A little further from Hagrid's hut, and Richard got down from the unicorn. "Can you understand me?" Richard asked the unicorn while stroking its head. The unicorn snorted loudly, then nodded. "Great, then the plan can continue." And then Richard took out the bone flute Forenza gave him and played it. "When the shadow of the tree is as long as the tree tomorrow, I will blow the bone flute, and you can come here to pick me up to your home, okay?" The unicorn snorted again and nodded, and Richard said it twice worryingly. Knowing that the unicorn showed an impatient expression, as if he said you thought I was a fool, so Richard let it go. Back to Hagrid again. Advertisement seeing that it was getting late. Forenza took the unicorn back to the Forbidden Forest. Richard also rushed back to Hogwarts Castle. On the way back to the dormitory, Richard also encountered an episode, that is, he met Filch. At this time, Filch was patrolling the castle with Mrs. Norris. After the encounter, Richard was not afraid because he had business to do, and said good evening to Filch directly. Seeing Richard, Filch was grateful to him, but also embarrassed to have his secret discovered. After exchanging hello with Richard, I left directly, feeling a little bit synchronized with my hands and feet when I left. "That's fine. I don't have to worry about being caught in the future," Richard chuckled. Back in the dormitory, Richard carefully calculated the itinerary for tomorrow and then fell asleep. In the afternoon of the next day, after Richard had a good class, the time had come to around 4 o'clock, according to the agreed time with the unicorn. Richard waited until all the students had gone out of the classroom, and first put himself in a phantom curse, then put on the invisibility cloak, and walked out of the classroom. Along the way, they carefully avoided the little wizards running around in the corridor. However, at a corner, Richard still collided with a little wizard. Seeing the little wizard fall to the ground, innocent and dazed, he screamed and crawled away. Bring a psychological shadow, but all kinds of mysterious events in the wizarding world may happen, so it's time to practice in advance. When he arrived at the place agreed with the unicorn last night, before Richard took out the bone flute, the unicorn was already standing there, pacing non-stop. Richard hurried over, first took away the invisibility cloak, and then touched the magic. When he saw Richard suddenly appearing in front of his eyes, the unicorn was also taken aback for a moment, then carefully sniffed it, and after confirming that it was Richard, he happily stretched out his tongue to lick it. Richard's face. In order to avoid being discovered by others, Richard hurriedly climbed onto the back of the unicorn, and then put on the disillusionment curse and the invisibility cloak together. Advertisement after feeling that Richard was on his back, the unicorn started running into the depths of the Forbidden Forest and ran faster and faster. On the way, Richard saw Hagrid. He knew that Hagrid would not be able to see him, but the guilty Richard still hurried to lie down. Down. It doesn't matter. The unicorn thought Richard was asking him to go to Hagrid, so he turned and ran towards Hagrid. Richard hurriedly shouted at the unicorn, "Don't go, go!" The unicorn stopped in doubt, and Hagrid, who saw the unicorn running towards him, was so excited that he put down the dead chicken in his hand and walked this way. Before taking 2 steps, I saw the unicorn running away in a hurry. This made Hagrid's big face full of small doubts, and he said to himself, "Why do you want to hear someone talking? Is it a hallucination?" Seeing that he was getting farther and farther away from Hagrid, Richard also felt relieved, but the speed of the unicorn was too fast. It was about to hit a tree, and then dodged it with a sudden lateral drift, which was too exciting. Fortunately, it didn't take too long for the unicorn to carry Richard to the side of a lake, and stopped. Richard got off the unicorn tremblingly, with burning pain on the inside of his 2 thighs. When he looked at the lake, Richard was also attracted by the beautiful scenery. This is a natural lake without any artificial traces. The entire lake is like a piece of flawless emerald. The breeze gently blows across the lake, causing layers of ripples. Under the sunshine, the lake is shining like fish scales. Like broken gold, it makes people happy. Richard couldn't help but came to the lake and stretched his hands into the lake water, feeling the coolness refreshing his heart. There are some flowers that Richard does not know are blooming by the lake, and they are blooming in full bloom, and the green plants next to the flowers decorate the whole scenery, making the lake scenery in this rich forest full of vitality, paired with the afterglow of the setting sun. All of this is so fascinating and refreshing. Chapter 49. Just when Richard was still fascinated by the scenery. In the woods behind Richard, more than a dozen silver unicorns came out lightly and lightly. Behind them were many little unicorns with golden fur. They were also disciplined and did not make any sound. However, curious eyes kept glancing here, and the unicorns of the leading unicorns have already flashed electric sparks from time to time. At this moment, the unicorn that brought Richard since the arrival of its kind snorted and ran to those tall unicorns, screaming non-stop. Richard also heard the sound, turned around and saw the unicorns. Seeing their horns flashing with lightning, Richard didn't take out his wand either. He knew that taking out his wand at this moment would be of no use at all. If these dozen or so unicorns were shooting lightning at him, no spell would be able to help him, and who knew if there would be more unicorns? The unicorn who brought him can convince other unicorns. Seeing those unicorns tweeting non-stop, Richard regretted it. He should learn a foreign language first, so that he would not be so embarrassed. There was a loud chirping sound. At this time, both sides of the chirping stopped, and then the unicorn standing there at first separated, and the unicorn that brought Richard came running over. He bit Richard's clothes and began to drag him into the woods. Not knowing why, Richard didn't refuse and followed the trend to the forest. After a short walk, he came to an open field. At this moment, Richard saw a huge silver unicorn lying there. A pair of printed scriptures stared straight at Richard. His eyes shone with wisdom and sensitive and meticulous. You almost feel that he has seen through him completely, and any lie is irresponsible for your own life. "Little wizard, why did you come to our territory?" Suddenly an old voice sounded from Richard's ear. "Who is it?" Richard was taken aback. "What the hell? Is there anyone else here?" "Don't be afraid. I'm right in front of you." Hearing this, Richard looked at the front, and there was still the huge unicorn just now, without any human figure. "Advertisement, it's me. I think human speech shouldn't be that difficult." "Damn, didn't you say that you were not allowed to become a demon after the founding of the People's Republic of China?" "Oh, this is another world. Forget it. My dear, I don't know how to address you," Richard said respectfully. "Don't be so restrained. I'm just a unicorn who lived a long time. My name is Uni Combs. You can call me Uni. Tell me, why did you come to my territory?" "Okay, Master Uni, it's actually nothing. I rescued a unicorn in the forest, and it can accept me. You must know that you generally only accept pure virgins, so I want to come alone. Look at other unicorns in the habitat of unicorns. You must know that unicorns are a representative of kindness and purity in the wizarding world, and we all like unicorns." Richard said the good words of no money without blushing. Nonsense. Facing this old monster-like unicorn, Richard must pretend to be as simple as possible. Who knows how many years this old guy has survived, but judging by his spiritual head, he should be able to continue to live for a long time. But as the saying goes, people are old and smart. Richard's little thought is still not enough for Uni, you guy. You didn't tell the truth, but I can see that you have no malice towards our family, so I don't care what purpose you hide. So can I play with the little unicorn? Sure, kids play with kids, but you can't force them. By the way, Master Uni, I would like to ask, besides you, are there any other unicorns that can speak human language? What about other magical animals? I don't know the language of other races except for unicorns. As for other magical animals, I don't know, but I can tell you that the magic power of magical animals and wizards grows with age. As for growth, except for those naturally long-lived races, the life cycle of ordinary magical animals is not too long. But once this life cycle is broken, both wisdom and magic power can be improved to a higher level. Miraculous herbal medicine breaks through the life cycle. I believe that as long as it is definitely not just me, I must learn to respect nature. Then can I come again? Yes, but it's best not to tell others. After all, your human greed is obvious to all. Advertisement, don't worry, Master Uni, I won't tell anyone. Okay, I'm going to rest, you go out first. After speaking, Yoni roared, and the unicorn that took the lead just now came in again. The unicorn came to Yoni, with its front legs bent, kneeling on the ground. My lord, what should I do with this wizard? Unicorn language, Richard couldn't understand. Don't worry about him. This wizard is very important. I have communicated with the priest of the centaur. He is related to the future of our family. We should try our best to get along with him. Fortunately, he has a good heart and is a good wizard. Yes, if he wants to play with the kids in the tribe, you let the kids accept it as much as possible. Of course, there is no need to force the kids. Unicorn language, Richard can't understand. After finishing speaking, Richard was brought back to the lake by the unicorn, and the other unicorns also scattered one after another, no longer resisting Richard. The unicorn that took Richard to the Forbidden Forest was also very excited when he saw Richard came back and circled around Richard. Richard sat by the lake and began to think about how to attract the little unicorns. Leaving aside the big ones, he tried to touch them just now. They cannot be picked up because they are not subdued, so they can only rely on the small ones. Generally, little unicorns must be more curious, and I can only use magic to attract their interest. First of all, it must be special, bright, and movable. The only thing that meets these requirements is the magic spell. It's up to you. Come out, call God to protect you. A burst of white light flashed, and a Yin-Huang dragon made of light appeared by the lake. Chapter 50. At the beginning, the unicorns were all affected by the movement here, but soon, they felt that the white light was very comfortable, and they felt full of positive energy from the dragon composed of that light, so they gradually moved closer to Richard. As time passed, a dull golden unicorn came to Richard with unskilled steps and approached the dragon. Richard was worried that there was something wrong, so he quickly directed the dragon to rise a little higher in the air. This time the little unicorn was in a hurry and even wanted to jump up to touch it, but this time it lost its foothold and fell to the ground. Richard went over to help it, and the little guy struggled away quickly. Richard didn't dare to use too much force, so he let go of the little guy. Then Richard let the dragon land on him. Seeing the dragon coming down, the little unicorn just wanted to come over, but when it saw Richard, he hesitated for a moment and then ran over. Seeing the little unicorn intoxicated by his patron saint, Richard only stroked it lightly at first, but seeing that the little unicorn did not resist, he hugged it directly. The container took out a special leaf that had been prepared long ago. This was the unicorn's favorite flavor that Hagrid told him. Sure enough, seeing the leaf, the little unicorn gave up struggling and started to show off happily. At this time, there was movement in the system. A magical animal has been detected. The magical animal has no attack ability against the host. It is in a restricted state by default. Do you want to enable the extraction mode now? Richard really wanted to store them all together, but the system settings can only be saved once, so they can only be extracted. Whether to enable targeted extraction, do not open. This has to be kept. The host chooses to draw randomly, juvenile unicorns 2 times, start to draw, 1/2, random selection, skill acquired, purify lightning, 2/2, random selection, experience value +10. I wiped out the skills. This is the first time. Richard burst into tears instantly. How many times has this happened? The first time a random skill came out, Richard, finally stood up. Suddenly, the face was wet. It turned out that the little unicorn in its arms saw Richard crying, and even stuck out its tongue and licked it twice. Overexcited, Richard hugged the little unicorn and gnawed it twice. Advertisement. Then Richard calmed down slowly. It's still exciting, and there are so many little things waiting for me. Although the mood has calmed down, the mood is still very high. He took out a large number of leaves that unicorns love to eat from the storage, piled them all around him, and then lifted the patron saint just now. This time I can't play the Patronus. The mana consumption is too great, and I can't last for too long. Then Richard cast the Guardian Spirit again, and there was no formed Guardian Spirit, but a large amount of white light continued to expand from the top of the wand. Seeing the white light appearing again, the little unicorns in the forest jumped up for joy. Seeing the little unicorn in front of Richard bathed in the white light, enjoying the food, they ran towards Richard one by one. There were still a few big unicorns to stop, but they were all stopped by the leader. In this way, almost a dozen little unicorns came to Richard's side, lowering their heads and eating the leaves on the ground. Richard was overjoyed to see this situation, like a little bee, constantly picking up the future of these unicorns. And the sound of the system kept beeping in Richard's mind. A magical animal has been detected. The magical animal has no attack ability against the host. It is in a restricted state by default. Do you want to enable the extraction mode now? Whether to enable targeted extraction. The host chooses to draw randomly, juvenile unicorns, 2 times, start to draw, 1/2, random selection, experience value plus 10 or 2/2, random selection, experience value plus 10. This is basically the case, but most of the little unicorns are able to resist, and they are subdued by Richard with violence. Basically, they are put down first, and then the body is pressed on them. Fortunately, these little unicorns who came over, they were all born not long ago, and they had no ability to resist the suppression of the big devil Richard. So they were easily succeeded by Richard again and again. With such a happy drawing, each little unicorn has already suffered from Richard's poisonous hands. But except for the first skill drawn out, all the others are experience points. Has the non-chief Richard returned to his position? Seeing the last little unicorn, Richard walked over numbly, held the little unicorn in his arms and rubbed the fur of the little unicorn vigorously. Not to mention the golden fluff of these little unicorns feels great. Even if it is not, it is also a good experience to extract skills. Advertisement reflexively choose to start drawing. Random drawing. 1/2, random selection. Experience value plus 10, 2/2, random selection. Acquired skill. Black magic resistance, passive. Suddenly a different voice sounded. Richard was stunned for a moment, then instantly became ecstatic, and made another gold withdrawal. Great. Originally, Richard wanted to sort out his gains this time, but when he saw the little unicorns around him, Richard felt his heart melted. So let's play with them first. Richard, who let go of his worries, devoted himself to playing with the little unicorns this time. Others at most suck cats, but I can suck unicorns, and a sense of pride arises spontaneously. Richard buried his face in the mane of a little unicorn, took a deep breath. There is a special milky smell and a natural smell. Although they look like horses, but a little bit of horses, there is no peculiar smell, and their hair is still so smooth, even smoother than Hermione's hair. Hermione can't let Hermione know this. At this time, the little unicorns were full and drank some water in the lake. They were all satisfied. One of the unicorns ran towards Richard first, without using the sharp horns on its head, but he ran to Richard's side and slammed into Richard with his body, and Richard was also knocked to the ground by the sudden attack. When the other little unicorns saw someone resisting the big devil, they ran over one by one, but they were careful not to open the sharp horns on their heads and hit Richard with their bodies. Soon the big devil Richard was defeated by the unicorns who fought back. Richard didn't use his magic wand, but took advantage of a unicorn's inattentiveness and hugged its neck. This little unicorn was completely powerless to resist. With a tragic neigh, the other little unicorns saw that Richard still dared to resist and organized a charge again, and soon Richard was suppressed again. In this way, Richard played happily with the little unicorns for a while. Okay, it's getting late. You should go back. Come and play next time when you have time. Suddenly a voice rang in Richard's ear. This is Uni's voice. At this time, the sky is completely dark, and the stars are dotted in the night, and everything reflected in the lake is so beautiful. After saying goodbye to Yoni, Richard also petted the little unicorns who had just played together one by one, and then found the unicorn that brought him, and let it take him back. At this time, the little unicorn who was the first to come looking for Richard seemed to want to go with Richard, but was kicked back by a big unicorn. The little unicorn that turned a somersault on the ground could only scream at Richard, as if saying goodbye to a new friend, and the other little unicorns also neighed, which moved Richard very much.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.